Welcome you to the June 8th, 2026 meeting of the Barrington Select Board. I'm going to call this meeting to order. It is 6:31 p.m. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please feel free to join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yes, and now we will do a roll call of everybody who is present, starting with Mr. Sakosha.
Sakosha here.
Capiello here.
Mantraka.
Hardikoff here.
Smacko present. Also present, we have our town administrator and deputy office administrator. So next, we're going to take a look at the agenda. Does anybody have any modifications to the agenda?
Nothing new. I'd make a motion to approve the June 8th, 2026 agenda.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Sakosha.
Capiello, aye.
Mantraka.
Hardikoff, aye.
Smacko, aye. Okay, the agenda is approved. So at this time, we're going to open our first public comment. There are 2 public comment sessions in each meeting. This is not an opportunity for a back and forth with the board, as we don't know what it is that you are going to say. The full instructions are on the town website. It will be limited to 3 minutes per person. If you're online, you can use the raise hand function. If you are present in the room, you may approach the lectern and identify yourself. Okay, at this time, I will close the first public comment. There will be a second public comment later in the meeting. And at this time, I'm going to move on to our public hearings and invited guests. We'll start with the school board liaison. And I do not see anybody here. So we will move on to our elected leaders series with Representative Michael Harrington. You're welcome to go to either location and just make sure that the light on your microphone is green, please.
I think it is. Yep.
Yep.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it. As everyone, I think, knows by now that the this session of the legislature ended last Thursday. The only thing left but now would be to addressing the governor's vetoes. And that would be probably sometime in September or October. But there's other than that, basically the legislature takes the summer off, if you will. There's a few commissions and things that go on, but for the most part, they don't, because we don't get paid any mileage during the summer. So that kind of puts the squash on that. So basically, I'm open to any questions. I mean, as far as some of the things I discussed with Connor, I know that there's an interest in a lot of the towns having to do with changing zoning laws and things like such as that. And, you know, it's a real, it's not necessarily Democrat Republican anymore on this one. It's more rural versus city, and the cities see it as a you know, we need to change it so we can get more housing out at affordable price. Well, where do you have more affordable land? Obviously in the rural areas. The rural areas look at that and say, well, if we're bringing in a lot of quote workforce housing, that generally means they're trying to attract younger people that probably have a family and have kids. And then those kids are going to go to school. And of course, you have to pay to send them to school, but they're not going to work in that town. They're going to work in Portsmouth or Rochester or Concord or someplace like that, where the larger companies tend to be. Barrington is lucky it has TurboCam, so at least there's a pretty big source of employment here. The other towns I represent, such as Stratford, I mean, I think the largest employer is a guy who makes signs, and he's maybe got 25 people working for him. And New Durham's not much different. Probably the restaurant on Route 11 probably employs the most people. But so that's sort of running battle between people wanting to put a one size fits all for the state, and then other ones want to say the town should make those decisions for themselves. And we've kind of split on this over the past year. Some things have passed, some things haven't. I think there's a line that's getting close to on things like when you start saying that you can put in multi-family housing and you don't have to have a minimum of parking spaces and stuff like that. And because that's when you start affecting other people. And that's to me is the line I try to use. It's just, I mean, it's one thing to say you're going to put on an auxiliary development unit, but is somebody going to put up, a 4-story building or something, or a 2-story duplex in their backyard? That's a whole different story, because then you start to talk about septic system impact, potential for water, where people are going to park, and all that other stuff. So that's an ongoing battle. The other major issue that came up, which will affect towns, is the tax cap issue. right now, as you're more than aware, I'm sure, a town has the ability to put a tax cap on. They do it as a warrant article, either at the school district meeting or the town meeting. And of course, there's two sides to this argument. One is, well, they can do it if they want, or why don't they, if that's what they want? But the other more practical kind, you can kind of look at it and say, like I was at the Stratford school meeting, I go every year. 5% of the registered voters, not 5% of the people that live there, 5% of the registered voters showed up. So you compare that to a September election, which in the case of this being an off-year election, you probably get 70% at least. And if it's a presidential year, you could be over 80%. So it's kind of hard to say, well, we should wait. We should only limit it to those people that go for the spring meeting, because some people will tell you, and I've asked people constantly about that. Why don't you show up? You complain about taxes, but then you never show up. Well, they have to work. They have kids. They have the meetings during the week, so they move them on Saturdays. Saturday's the only day I can do this or that. I have to do this. I've been there twice, and everything on the agenda always passes, so I don't go anymore because it's a waste of time. Those are the big reasons you hear. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, because it'll obviously be a lot more people voting on it. And of course, the town has the ability then to override that in the subsequent elections. So that's going to be a major issue.
Do you have any sense of how the governor's going to vote on that?
I think she's going to sign the bill.
You do?
Yeah. She's she hasn't really spoken out too much against it. So I'm pretty sure that she will, because normally by this stage you have a pretty good feel, because they will, you get feedback on, we need to change this because the governor thinks this is something to be needed. We had a bill on the regional greenhouse initiative, RGGI gas initiative, which I've been, never would have believed this, but I started on that 20-something years ago when Governor Benson appointed me. I was a PUC commissioner at the time. And it's still going on, and the guy working with me most is Bob Scott, who was working with me back then. Now he's the commissioner of DES. But we got feedback from the governor on things that they didn't want in the bill, and I worked directly with people from the governor's office to make the changes. Because, I mean, there's really no sense in just tossing it at her, because, I mean, to be quite practical about it, if the governor vetoes something, it's not going to get overridden, because the Democrats are just going to uphold the veto because it was passed by a Republican House members or Senate members. So that's an automatic veto will be upheld. It's not going to be overturned. So you have to try to avoid that. So
Can I go back to one
Sure.
statistic that I want to see if I heard it correctly? You said in non-presidential years, about 70% of people
yeah,
voting.
that's what
I mean, we get 40%, and that's a high level. How are you?
Well, that's
getting
what
70%
I've been told the statewide average is. So this is
For the
the November elections,
for
not the
general
town
election,
elections.
not
Yeah.
for-
Not the March
not for
elections. No.
town
No, if you get 40, you're probably doing pretty good. Even
Ah,
on
we
that,
think
yeah,
we're
yeah.
doing pretty
And
good.
at the meeting itself, you probably don't even get close to that. That's what I'm guessing. But yeah, this is for the November elections, where they were electing the governor and state representatives and so forth. And so that's a little bit different. But so that's going to come up, and I don't think anyone has a real feel how it's going to play out. It'll be on the ballot twice, in this year and then again in 2028. So it'll be a non-presidential year and a presidential year. And anyone's guess as to how this is going to come out. I mean, I'm sure you people have heard it all. There's a lot of frustration with spending in taxes, and we see the amount of kids in the state have gone down substantially. I mean, we've dropped the number of students. So it's I think it's over 20% in the last 10 or 15 years, but the costs keep going up. So it's one of those things that, some of them are obviously beyond people's control. I mean, it took a lot of places took a huge hit. We were lucky actually in Stratford on it, but in healthcare, because of that carrier that a lot of the towns had, it just prices went way up. So
Representative Harrington, real quick on that. I think, the motivation to get something done makes sense, and move on that. Structurally, there are a couple of real flaws in the way that's being rolled out this year. First, our budgets are set.
right.
And now we have to, and it's a municipal responsibility, even though it's a school tax cap question. The law is clear that the municipality has to
goes through the
effectuate
town.
this.
Yeah.
Now we have to pay for separate ballots when the question could have been placed on the same ballot and save that cost. We have to pay for separate ballot coding so that our counting machines can count that separate ballot. And those costs in a budget year, especially when, this year residents voted down a lot of our separate appropriations because, money's tight.
Right.
And so I think it's unfortunate. Reasonable approach, fine. That's what the folks in Concord get to make those decisions. But to do that mid-budget year and just saddle municipalities with
I would
that
have preferred
burden.
that it was done in going to the future instead of not 2026, do it in 2028.
Right.
If you wanted to do it twice, do it 2028 and 2030.
Right.
I agree. And it's, it's like making sausage is the best way to describe it. And sometimes you look at these
Understood.
things, especially in the last couple of weeks at the end of session, it's like, where the hell did this come from? It's got absolutely nothing to do with this bill, but the Senate decided they wanted to put it in, and the House had defeated it. And so if you want this bill, you're going to have to take this with it, and so forth. And that's how a lot of this stuff gets done. It's not always the most efficient. And sometimes, as I was just discussing with the gentleman here, we put out feel-good legislation. This is on these temporary solar panels, and it basically says don't install anything above 1,200 watts, but there's no provision for enforcement, and there's no penalty if you do. So, what did the law accomplish? Basically nothing, but it made somebody feel good. So the other thing I wanted to mention is, because this was brought up last year, is the car inspection situation, which I'm sure you've all heard quite a bit about on that. And the status of that right now is this lawsuit still going on that was brought in by the company that actually performed the inspections. They were the administrative did the inspections, not the physical part of it, but they ran the program. And there's a waiver down in the Environmental Protection Agency to get rid of the diagnostic testing on cars. It's way of background that came from, again, it was 20-something years ago. And they said you had to do tailpipe testing, and the state didn't want to do tailpipe testing. So someone came up with the idea, I don't remember exactly who it was, but said, well, wait a minute, since we have all these diagnostic testing things on there, if they're all working properly, then the emissions should be okay. So people looked into it and they said, yeah, that makes sense, fine. So just make sure you have those diagnostics working, and then we won't do tailpipe testing. And that's the way it's been since that 20-something years ago. Well, then when they got rid of this, I tried to convince them again with my friend Bob Scott, who was the commissioner of DES, because we had both worked on this 20 years ago. And I said, just wait a year. And, we've had these inspections for this long. No one's going to die over one more year's inspection. And no, we want to do it now and get it. And that's what happened. So, of course, then there's a lawsuit. And then the EPA, you probably never had to deal with them. Or hopefully you've never had to deal with them. But, talk about trying to push molasses. They are really, really slow, and they have all these different requirements, and you have to post things in the public record for 30 days, and then you have to bring it back and address comments, and then post a resolution of the comments, and it goes on and on and on. But theoretically, by the end of this year, we should have the approval for that, because a lot of the situations have changed in New Hampshire due to air quality. The biggest reason is because of so much less coal is being burned in Ohio and Pennsylvania, which is where a lot of our pollution came from. It was being burned out there. Most of those have been now shut down, replaced by natural gas, because it simply is cheaper and it's also a lot cleaner. So I'm pretty sure it's going to get approved. Besides the guy who's the regional administrator for the EPA for New England now is the former assistant commissioner of DES from New Hampshire. So.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Interesting. What's his name?
Well, I can't think of his name.
Okay.
I just know he was there. But,
interesting.
yeah, he used to work for Bob directly. So,
Great.
but
Representative Harrington.
Sure.
What do you think the best pathway for lowering electricity costs in the state of New Hampshire?
well, the best pathway for lowering electricity costs is there is one. Okay, I try to convince this of people in leadership positions, as well as in the governor's office. It's not going to happen. Okay, just you got to be realistic about it. You can wish it away. The only practical way that you could actually do something would be get rid of some of the mandates and requirements. Like we have a renewable portfolio standard, so that requires the utilities to buy these RECs. So if you have, let's use solar power, for example. So every megawatt of solar power you produce, you get a REC. And the utilities have to buy those RECs, and they get set by, depending on the availability of them, the prices can move up and down. That price, the utilities just pass directly on to the ratepayer. And because it's a non-bypassable charge, it goes in your distribution charges. And there's also net metering, which works out well if you're the net metering person. but you're getting paid a lot more for your electricity than the utility could buy it for. I mean, in some cases, you're talking wholesale prices in the 4 cents, 4.5 cents a kilowatt hours when the average, sometimes they get higher, but on average, and they're getting paid, I think, 18 cents. So the more of those they have, the more it is. And to put that in perspective, I guess, and to make it even more pronounced is Massachusetts Eversource and New Hampshire Eversource, same company. I mean, it's a different division, but they're the same higher ups. They probably use the same people to negotiate power contracts. But the retail cost of electricity for homeowners in Massachusetts is about 30% higher. And that's because they have all these extra mandates for energy efficiency, renewable energy, and all these, quote, programs. You can get, I think, $10,000 to put in a heat pump. Well, the $10,000 comes from somebody. And obviously, it comes from the ratepayers. So in New Hampshire, you could say, well, if you got rid of all of those programs, it would save you some money. But it's not going to happen politically. I can tell you, there's no way it's going to happen. So that's not going to happen. The other thing you have to remember also is that when you look at this, if you go back and you look since we went to competitive markets to produce our electricity, i.e. the utilities sold off their generating capacity, we have the wholesale price of electricity, which you can look up anytime you want on the ISO New England website, has basically gone up a little, but way less than inflation over the last 20 years. And so the cost of generation is not what's driving it up. It's all these other things. Cost of transmission is driving it up. On the federal level, one thing that could be done is, well, in fact, right now, FERC just ruled they knocked down the return on equity for transmission projects by a full percentage point, which that's going to be big. And that's because you're talking $1.3 billion they're going to have to rebate to the electric users in New England. But of course, they're fighting that in court. But transmission costs have gone up a lot. Pet peeve of mine is that if you have being a former PUC commissioner, if Eversource wanted to put in a distribution system upgrade in New Hampshire, say it costs $10 million, we would have people look through everything on it and say, make sure, wait a minute, why did you do this? Why is that cost justified? Now, the same company, Eversource, is going to do a transmission upgrade, except it's not going to be $5 million. It's going to be $500 million. They go to FERC, which is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and they have a policy called presumption of prudency, which means here's your package, which would be, now it's electronic. They used to come in paper, they'd be this high. And FERC would go, we presume everything is prudent unless someone tells us otherwise. Well, if you get that message after a while, I'm not saying they're cheating, but boy, you're not so sharp with the pencil if you know no one's looking over your shoulder. And that's one thing we've been trying to push. In fact, we passed a resolution in the House for that, but we've had no action out of congressional people on it. That would be something that could help. But it's just, and I'm a nuclear engineer, so don't get me the wrong idea here. Probably the only one you're ever going to meet that's read every issue of nuclear news for the last 50 years. But nuclear power has its place, but this idea that it's going to be a savior and make everything really cheap isn't going to happen, not for a while. Now, if they actually get to the modular reactors where they start building these things, okay, you build them in blocks of 20 megawatts, and I'll take 4 of them for this location, I'll take 3 of them for this location, and they build them in a factory and they're standardized, that should lead to reduced costs. But that's not going to happen for a while, number one. And number two, like I said, the wholesale price of electricity has not been the big driver of the price increases. It's all the other stuff. So even if you got cheaper, say if you were able to put it out without any increase for 5 years in price, if you've got these other things still going up. And it's a worldwide problem. Right now, there's somewhere between a 3 and 5 year backlog on power transformers. So, that's just the way it is because they don't make them that many places. And because of the explosion of natural gas turbines have a 5 year backlog for large ones too. So all those things, of course, add price because there's more demand. Anyways, that was the other thing I just wanted to mention. So on the inspections, I don't know how we get off that far from inspections, but so that's probably just going to roll along, and then it'll probably sometime towards the end of the year, it'll get out. And what I tell people, and I think it should be encouraged, is simply because the government doesn't mandate you get your car inspected doesn't mean you shouldn't get your car inspected. And I'm sure you can go into a mechanic and just simply say, do what you would have done otherwise. And maybe the difference would be if it's a, the tail light's out, I'll say, well, I'll go get it at Walmart tomorrow. I won't have you put it in for $25. But I mean, if you need new brakes, hopefully you get new brakes. So that would be it on that. And other than that, just open for whatever questions anybody has.
Sure. Yeah, so if I may, and then Tracy, I'm sure has a question. So, you brought up House Bill 1300, and I do think that even though we are not the ones that set the school budget, that has been a big issue. Our school budget didn't pass this year. A lot of the ire regarding property taxes, which is 73% school budget, is still directed at the people
Oh
sitting
yeah, I
before
see
you
it
today.
on Facebook. So
Yes, you are very active on Facebook. I have seen that. But what I wanted to know is, I looked up to see how you voted on it. You voted in favor of it. And I pulled the, the public comments that had been submitted from the towns, Barrington, New Durham, and Stratford, because there's not a lot of ways to measure, actual educated public opinion
Right.
on these issues. And it's certainly alarming for me, I don't speak for the whole board, but for me, when I see that we are already scraping to make up a gap in, diminishing funding that we're getting from other sources where we're having to make up, which is driving up, at least in part, these school budgets. Cost is also a big issue. So, you felt necessary to vote yes on HB 1300 of the cap, yes. Of the public comments submitted by people in the towns that you represent, Barrington, 4 submissions, all against, New Durham, 1 for, 1 against, Stratford, 8 against, 1 for. So overwhelmingly, the small amount of feedback that was submitted was against it. We need solutions that face problems from all angles. And personally, I don't know that this is going to fix that. So what I want to know is what else are you working on in Concord that's going to fix the inevitable gap between budget and need when these caps get voted for?
well, I think that's going to be more up to the towns themselves. Just my comment on the feedback you got there. I got substantially more feedback than that.
I'm sure
to
we
me
don't have
personally.
access to that.
And as I was mentioning to Connor today, it's one of the problems is now it's become so over the top crazy that I can get 200, 300 emails on a singular issue. And I'll pass this along to everybody in the room here. You obviously know how to get in touch with me. The best way, call me, because then I'll pick up the phone, because I could get 75 emails from Oklahoma on a bill that's coming up in New Hampshire. And it's just like, it's a form email, and the only thing different is the name at the bottom. But if you tell your people put Barrington resident in the subject block, I always try to get to those. So that's one way you can do it. And as far as the cap itself and the overall thing with the schools, I think the schools have got to look at that themselves. I mean, I'm a big believer in competition, and I think anything that brings that on, and I'll use a experience from my own life on that. Back when I worked at Seabrook for a number of years, I was the procurement engineering manager there, and we were owned by a utility, by public service. And so there was really no competition involved. If you couldn't run, you had to shut the plant down for whatever reason, refueling outages or other causes. You would simply go to the Public Utilities Commission and say, well, we need to get money to pay for this because we've got to buy extra fuel for something else and blah, blah, blah. And almost all of it was approved. And then we went to the point where they went to competitive markets. And the big, huge change there was before competitive markets, when you could go to the bureaucrats and say, please give us more money, the capacity factor at Seabrook was around 57, 58%. After competition, it's over 90%. And they just said, we've got to do it better, smarter, and people will get better. And I think the schools can come up with ways to being more creative and do things in a better way. If they're told you have to step up and do it. As long as, I mean, like I can only speak for Stratford, but I can't remember the last time we didn't approve everything on the school budget. And as long as that's the case, then you're not going to have people sitting there going, how can I do this better and not spend so much money? And I think that there's a possibility of doing that.
As politely as possible to jump into this discussion, Can you think of a good product, service, or personnel cost that has gone down over the past 10 to 15 years?
Product service has gone down. Yeah, well, widescreen TVs.
Okay. Anything else? We don't have a lot of those in the school system.
Well,
so.
electronic type things on that idea. Not saying that you have to.
So I guess my concern with what the schools will experience, we have not seen energy costs go down. We have not seen large decreases in the cost to repair buildings. We've only seen increases in trades cost because there are so few people going into trades, which is why I mentioned personnel. I can't see how we can approach a school system and tell them that they're to reduce costs when the few things, electronics and TVs, that we're able to grasp at for some reductions over 15 years, they're just not available to them. And I'm thinking of the perspective and what we go through to create a budget for this town, still retain very qualified employees with just crazy historical knowledge and toolkits that we're so lucky to have, and background education and knowledge that we're so lucky to have. I don't see how we're going to approach our school systems and say, come up with the magic money when costs are not going down.
Well,
And so I ask that not to be snarky.
No,
I
that's
ask
not.
that to
That's
be a
anyone.
realist, because I am very, I would say, fiscally responsible. And I just don't see where things are going to come from magically.
Well, again, I'll go back to the example from my own life. If you had gone back in the 1980s and said you were going to have a nuclear plant, in order to be competitive, was going to have a capacity factor over 85%, people would have said, that can't happen. It can't be done. It's impossible. But it was made to happen because people were told you have to look for something. I mean, I'll give you an example out of, which I thought was kind of embarrassing, out of Stratford School. They said they had to hire an 8th grade math specialist because the teachers they had apparently couldn't teach 8th grade math. We're not talking differential equations here. We're talking, pre-algebra or something. And I can't believe that a college educated graduate teacher cannot teach 8th grade math. So things like that, that's the reaction. It's always go spend some more money. And on top of that, you see the test scores are going down. I mean, in Stratford, they've taken quite a dive over the years. And I just think that if you come up with a thing where sick people have a different mentality, that this isn't like, oh, well, we don't know how to cut costs, so we're just going to have to raise taxes. If they come up and say, no, we're not going to do that, that they'll find ways to do it.
Apparently they haven't.
Because I don't think there's been enough pressure on them to do it. That's why. Because of the 5% of the people that show up at the meeting, and we couldn't get, I don't think a guy wanted a 1% cut in one line item. We couldn't even get that passed this year. So, because the people with the special interest show up, all the teachers, friends, teachers' relatives, they come.
It's possible, though.
Yeah.
Public education is not special interest. We have a
But then,
requirement to educate our children.
Maybe
so.
you misunderstood. I was saying they have a special interest in the outcome of the budget, not that they're special. If you're a teacher, or if you work at the school, or your wife works at the school, you have an interest in that the average person might not have. That's what I'm saying.
Actually, I don't have any children, but I certainly want them to be educated.
Well, I think
and I don't
everybody does.
think that I have a particular special interest here, but I noticed that the state's come up with some, I think you voted against it, House 10 or 1602, no, that's a different place, about the cost of education, 1061, to look at the cost of education that the Constitution of the state says we have to do. And I don't understand, what is it, $6 or something per student? I don't know how, well, I don't know what the number is, but it's kind of
thousands.
Okay, but it's not anywhere near what the cost of educating that child is. I think it's.
Respectfully have to disagree with you on the Constitution. I think you're going to see that decision, that Claremont decision, be overturned. because it says in the Constitution, we cherish education. And somehow that's got to the point now where we have a municipal judge, a judge sitting down and saying, okay, you should spend this much money on buses and this much money on copy machines and this much money on basketballs and this much money on whatever. And, you know, down to the dollar level. And it's simply not the authority of the judge to be doing that. I just don't see that at all. So,
But with all due respect, as someone in the legal field who also has a background in nuclear power, maybe we can chat later. We have to operate under the Claremont decision until it's overturned.
Right, I
We can't
understand
operate in hopes that someday it fixes and we're absolved of our crimes. Like, we still need to offer a adequate education, and without other solutions, and this is, you know, I'm hoping that when the new legislative session starts, that this can be something that can be addressed. We need solutions that will work hand in hand with the things you're giving us, like the possibility of a budget cap. I understand that your focus and your experience is primarily in Stratford, where things pass every year. We are already in a situation here in Barrington where our school budget didn't pass. And you made a comment earlier, you know, in your personal life experience, that if you didn't do things more efficiently, you would get shut down. That's not really a realistic option for us.
well, I didn't mean to shut down. I'm saying that was the case of Seabrook, because you wouldn't, if you didn't operate more efficiently, you couldn't compete. And what I'm saying is, if you have a mentality that with nothing we can do about cost, and this is what we basically have been hearing for years from the people at the schools, this is my experience, every time you add a student, you increase costs. If you take a student away, it doesn't make any difference. Costs don't go down. So it's a mentality that I think people have to look at. I remember years ago, I had a discussion with the superintendent for Stratford, and I said, you know, why are we having this huge increase in special education requirements? And he said, well, I'll be quite honest with you, Mike. He says, someone comes in and they say, you know, Billy's got this special education curriculum and they have a plan for him and all this other stuff, but my little Susie doesn't. How come she can't get it? Well, she's not, just doesn't need it. Well, I think she does. And what he told me is there's organizations out there that would help them, the parent, take the school district to court and sue and say, I want my kid to have this special education. So he said, it's easier just to simply say, okay, the parents push hard on it, we'll allow it to be done. And I said, well, it's easier in the short term, but not in the long term. When you've got, what was it, 25% of the kids now are coded to special ed?
Yeah, I can assure you we're just much more aware about people being neurodivergent now, or potentially much more aware of what barriers may be within learning, and much more aware of children's adaptive capabilities. It is not that the schools are rubber stamping typical students into 504s or IEPs.
There's a lot more of them now than there was, and the results of the test
Again,
down.
we're much more aware. We're much more aware from a
Right.
pediatrician's perspective of what to look for in early childhood education, and we're just much more aware. And I hope that makes us a smarter society going forward. The one other thing I'll just point out, I just traveled cross country, had a beautiful trip to Gettysburg for the
that must have been
250th anniversary of this nation.
Weather out there?
But it was gorgeous. One of the things I saw on many of the roadways I was on, though, were a lot of broken down cars. And so I will tell you, I've disagreed with removing the inspection stickers in New Hampshire. I think we're going to end up potentially seeing what I saw on some of those highways, which are broken down cars, tow trucks trying to remove them, and I think 5 major slowdowns trying to drive to Gettysburg. So just feedback on that.
Okay.
There's unintended consequences of everything that we do, and that's probably one of them.
One last thing I wanted to mention, I don't want to take up your whole meeting here, but one of the things, and I'm not personally not opposed to gambling at all. I think people want to gamble, they should gamble, but I think it's a ticking time bomb in New Hampshire, because for the first time ever, this budget now has gambling revenues going to the general fund, where before they would all go to the education trust fund, which you had, okay, you have some control over that because you haven't appropriated specific appropriations for it. I think that was a major mistake when they did that. And right now, the revenue from the video slot machines, whatever exactly that means, they're not coming in as expected. They're down. And I can remember that back some years ago, when I was at the PUC, in 2008, I guess, they had 2006, people lined up 3 deep at the casinos in Connecticut to wait just to get to a seat at a blackjack table. And then the recession hit in 2008, and one of the first things people stopped doing was gambling. Connecticut had to pass a massive tax increase, plus they had to give a big cut to state workers' pay. And I don't want to set us up in that situation, and I tried to get people to go to talk on this. In fact, I tried to put a bill in that would say that the money had to go to the Education Trust Fund and not for general, and it just got thrown out because it's good money because no one complains about it. It's not a tax, but it doesn't produce any more revenue. I mean, this isn't Las Vegas. Maybe there's a few people that are driving to Nashua from Massachusetts, but the casino in Rochester, I don't think that's not bringing in people from New Jersey and New York City to spend money, or the people that spend their money there, they ain't spending it someplace else. So I just think that's something we've got to be really careful about going forward, and it could become a time bomb for the state. So,
Any other questions from the board?
thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank
Enjoy
you.
your summer.
We appreciate your feedback. Also.
Connie, you know where to find me.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Okay, we're going to move on to our next public hearing, which is regarding the Homestead Road renumbering.
So we have you all recall the failed subdivision that was tax deeded out beyond Garrier, and the homestead went through a couple of different iterations. And the original subdivision was partially built out, which became problematic. And we ultimately sold that tax deeded property at auction. The developer that bought the property has worked to comply with the town's restrictions in developing a portion of that property, I think going from 23 lots to 11, I think was the number, and moving some of the conservation property. One relic of the old subdivision was the numbering of Homestead Lane. And this number, Homestead Lane, this numbering started when the road was originally laid out in a different configuration than how it exists now and how it will exist in the future. And the problem with that is that the developer who bought the property from the town is adding a couple of addresses on Homestead Lane. And so we have excellent partners at the state through E911 that provide guidance to us in dealing with these road naming and numbering circumstances. And so we have, at the leadership of our municipal office administrator, Tiffany Cottle, gone through a comprehensive process, talking with public safety leaders, our public works staff, and our partners at E911 to recommend new numbering for 3 existing houses up on Homestead Lane. And so you see those new numbers listed in the town administrator report. We did, as a courtesy, reach out to the developer and ask him if he was interested in having a conversation with the property owners to make them aware of what was happening. He worked closely with all 3 of them through the development project. He did that. We also sent letters. We heard back from 2 of the property owners. One agreed to have the address changed, which doesn't require a public hearing. One asked some questions, didn't immediately express an interest in voluntarily changing the number. Of course, some people have had their addresses changed a couple of times living in the same house. So there is some road name and numbering changing fatigue that folks experience. Anyways, we have prepared a public hearing tonight consistent with state law, which includes a notice to property owners, also a notice in Foster's, and it is a public hearing, so we will need to open for public comment. I mentioned our partners at E911. We do have a representative from E911 available for any questions that the board or the community may have. And certainly if you have questions for staff, I'd probably direct those to Municipal Office Administrator Call.
Okay, I think we'll start with questions. That way, if anybody who wants to speak in public comment has a thought related to those, they've heard the information. So does anybody from the board have a question for our E911 representative or for Ms. Cottle?
I was going to say, it makes some sense that we need to have some sort of resolution to this sooner rather than later, just for safety considerations.
And I think that is the big part, is the safety consideration. I understand it's frustrating. My house has changed numbers. I know your house has changed numbers. It's not,
Changed 3 times and I
Yeah.
haven't moved.
yeah, it's not easy, but it also, we need to make sure that no matter who is living there, E911 knows where to send people. Any comments you wanted to make? I cannot read. Stephanie, I know you're online. Any comments you wanted to make to add to the discussion? You don't have to, but I would give you the opportunity. Okay. All right. At this time, then I will open public comment. If you are online, please use the raise hand feature. This is specific to this hearing. If you're in the room, please approach the lectern or the table and identify yourself. I am not seeing any, so at this time I will close public comment on the Homestead Road renumbering hearing. And if there's no further discussion or questions from the board, I would entertain a motion.
I would make a motion to alter the numbers of 84 and 67 Homestead Lane to 5 Homestead Lane and 24 Homestead Lane respectively, as recommended by E911 and the Barrington Public Safety, effective July 29th.
Second?
Okay, all in favor?
Crochet.
Capiello, aye.
And
And thank you
Shreka?
to the other resident who already did it.
Yeah.
Yes,
Agree.
definitely. And Samako, aye. Okay. Then we're going to move on to a public hearing on the draft septic ordinance.
Terrific, thank you. I will welcome to the table our consultant Lisa Murphy from Stratford Regional Planning Commission and our building inspector, zoning administrator, code enforcement officer, health officer extraordinaire, Jamie Jennison.
Welcome.
My longest title, I think.
I'm gonna try to add a few more things to that.
Hey, that guy. And Jamie, if you want to grab that microphone up there so you can both have one. So just by way of introduction, I included in the town administrator report the background for this grant-funded project from Piscataqua Region Estuaries Partnership, the select board's prior involvement, including supporting the grant application and assigning a septic ordinance advisory group member, of which we have had updates throughout the process. And so what you have in your printed packet is a copy for that septic ordinance advisory group of a draft ordinance for select board consideration. So that material is available to select board and electronically to anybody that's interested. Turn it over to you two.
All right, first I'd like to say thank you to the steering committee members who helped with this. We worked very amicably. Some had different goals than others, and different ideas of what the appropriate approach would be. So those members, Patrice Lindsay, Dan Cassidy, Ron Allard, Joyce Capello, Wendy Tremblay, John Driscoll, and Ernie Prevling, and Jamie. So it was a very good group of people, and like I said, we didn't all agree, and we came up with an ordinance that is not the strictest that we could have in terms of helping water protection, but it's also not, it is something that at least gets people to understand that, they need to be responsible for maintaining and having their septic system cleaned. Jamie was very instrumental in this because he knows his stuff. He definitely knows his stuff. So I'm going to turn it over to you, I think, if you have wanted to say some things.
Yeah. It was a great working group, trying to have a mix of water protection and, not too overburdensome of a regulation that we're really going to impose some financial constraints. But so it's really just a pumping ordinance at the heart of it, getting people to maintain and be aware of their septic systems. You'd be surprised how many people come from municipalities that have public sewer and they don't know about pumping. And then of course we have a lot of camps on the lake that may not have state approved septics. And so this covers that all in a fairly soft handed approach. And I say that because, as Lisa mentioned, it could have been much more restrictive. There certainly is some financial a large financial component, just the pumping that should be done anyways and a good maintenance of your septic system. But I think it's reasonable. The administration of it is my only concern, because it will fall in my lap as another thing to do. And but I'm willing and able to accept that as I see the benefit. One thing, we've already got a cyano bloom in Swains, and it's early in the year, and it surprises me. And I wish we could pinpoint why and where, and track it back to someone's house specific. I don't even know if it's that. It could be, gravel and the phosphorus washing out of the gravel as they regrade their roads this spring. I mean, that could be the big problem. But this could be a step in the right, step in the right direction.
So what I've laid out for the select board, so this is, this type of municipal regulation is uncharted territory for the town. We don't have any health ordinances that the select board have adopted previously. So state law, even after all of the rescinding of health officer authority post-COVID that the legislature did, state law still provides the select board with the ability, following a prescribed process, to enact such an ordinance and, set an effective date. And so I think, certainly that is an option that the select board has. I think an important part of this review process, now that we have a draft, is investing some time and energy in engaging the folks who will be most impacted. And fortunately, this grant program has a fair amount of money set aside for public outreach, so we can continue through the end of September spending down the outreach funds to help reach folks in the most effective way possible, and set up some sort of a public information meeting, if it gets past this phase of the review process, and get the specific details out to the people that are most impacted and hear that feedback. And I think the select board at that time could reserve their decision on how to move forward. Certainly, if we have a broad audience from all the major water bodies in Barrington and they all show up in force to hear about this proposed septic ordinance, and they're all, supportive, saying, hey, this is a great idea. I live here, I'm the one that's impacted, but I support this because the health of our lakes is the most important thing. Maybe the select board would want to consider just adopting as a health ordinance and moving forward. If there's mixed results from folks that live on the lake that, hey, the financial impact, or, hey, I have an aerobic bacteria system in my septic tank and I don't need to pump it. I could go 20 years without pumping it, and the system that I have shouldn't need to be pumped the way that others need to, or whatever the circumstances are. The select board could sponsor an advisory article for town meeting in March of 2027 to have some guidance from the broader community about whether or not this type of municipal regulation is appropriate for our community. Certainly that wouldn't be necessary to adopt the ordinance, but it could give the select board guidance in whether or not to move forward. Or if you have this informational hearing and everybody is diabolically opposed and this isn't a Barrington fit for a set of regulations, the select board could shelve the subject matter until it seems like it's more appropriate. So the next step recommended would be an information session in August or September.
Yes.
Quick question, the seasonal dwelling of 6 consecutive months, not more than 6 consecutive months, does that match like how we do taxation on seasonal dwellings as well? Like, would we expect people to only reside in a seasonal property 6 months if we've determined that it's seasonal, or is it 9 months or 8 months?
There's no seasonal impact on taxation. I mean, your taxation is based on assessed value, market value. So you could have a multi-million-dollar seasonal home and spend 2 weeks of the summer there and it sit empty for the rest of the 50 weeks of the year, but you pay the same in taxes as your neighbor who lives in the same multi-million-dollar home and lives there year-round. So there's no basis for taxation based on residency or how long you live there, how often it's used. It's just market value.
Is there a reason that we included that definition in there as opposed to just dwellings within the 250-foot buffer?
The reference was for conversion later on in the regulation when you talk about a conversion, and then the trigger for the conversion to require either a state-approved septic or some version of that. So I think those are just definitions that we're putting in there, somewhat in line with our our recreational use regulation that allows 180 days. It doesn't contemplate consecutive days, which is difficult. So it was, that came from the old WEQ from the state. They had a definition of seasonal. They just took it out this year. So as we were working on this, we were working from the existing document that had a nice definition of seasonal. And so we were trying to mimic that language because that's what that ENVWQ 1000 said was, previous to this for 9 months prior to 1989, language similar to that. So we just kind of cut and pasted that, thinking that later on when it says conversion of a seasonal dwelling, we'd have similar language that would match.
And that's on page 2, number 4, under regulations. So that's what that definition applies to.
It does occur to me, it really doesn't matter much whether you're seasonal or you're permanent, if it's polluting, whether you're there 2 months or 2 weeks or 2 years, if it's still polluting, don't we need to do something to regulate that?
Agreed. In the argument from the committee was the impact's less, it's only for a shorter period of time. And like you stated, if you have a system that's non-existent and everything's going, flowing out without being, filtered, it doesn't matter if you're there for a week. Obviously, if you're there for the year and you have that same system, the impact's multiplied tenfold. But, this was a balance of members' concerns.
And to be clear, state law does not allow you to operate a failed septic system, period. So, certainly it has to be identified and it can be reported and inspected and, all the rest, but you're not allowed to have a septic system that is leaching anywhere, let alone into a water body. And the town has been involved previously. Who's the new David Price?
Last name Ayton. I think it's same Dave, first name Bill.
Oh,
Yeah,
convenient.
Dave Ayton,
So
yeah.
we call Dave.
Yeah.
But the town has been reported before, hey, I think my neighbor's leach field is failed and leaking out into the lake. And that, we don't regulate that. The state regulates that. They come out, do an inspection. They have an enforcement provision.
And to be clear, as a health officer, I have the authority to remove someone from their home. They have the option. They can pump it if it's in failure. They have 180 days to replace it regardless. State law says you have 180 days to replace your septic if it's found in failure. Finding it in failure is difficult unless it's bubbling up from the surface water and you can define it as effluent. But they have 180 days and they have the options in certain circumstances to either pump it before the tank fills. You can do porta potties and not use the bathing facilities, or we can remove them from the home if they don't want to comply. So I do have that inherent authority as the health officer from the state RSA.
So I did sit on this committee, but as I look at this, I'm wondering, I think these would be questions that residents ask. So I just had my septic, let's say this goes into effect, and I just had my septic pumped the year before. How do I get credit for that? And the system, and I think it's going to be that when people pay their taxes, they would have to submit. Isn't that what we decided?
We talked, I don't think anything was decided. I think, that would still have to be worked out what the best system is for tracking it. I think that's one that's got some annual dates that are already established that might be easy to follow, but interdepartmental followings, I might have to find a solo standalone version, so that will have to still
Will
work
the new
out.
software help you?
I think it can. Yeah, I have to explore the other part of the permit software is the code enforcement, which is more for violations. But I think that I could wedge it into that as a violation, a 3-year violation type. So I think I could find a way to work it into that software that it might be a good fit. Yeah.
It's still recommended if you have a household with just 2 adults in it, but it's a 4-bedroom house that they pump every 3 years.
We discussed that.
Yeah, it's.
I'm just thinking of like my own experience in my own home, and
There are so many variables,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Like, do you use disinfecting soap? How much oil or grease are you putting down?
How
the
much
drain?
laundry do you use? What type of detergent?
You have
You know,
a
do you use,
garbage disposal.
do you have a garbage disposal? Do you have your salt, your water softener pumping into your septic, which you shouldn't? Do you, you know, I mean, some people flush cat litter, you know, and you'd be amazed at what some people do, right? You know, but if you don't know and you're used to scooping out your cat litter box and you throw it in your toilet and flush it, people do it. You know, so there's untold. And the same person that says it's just the two of us, but every weekend 20 family members show up because they're on the lake. Yeah, it's just two of you living there, but 20, you know what I mean? So all those discussions came up and they were important, but they're just impossible to regulate.
Okay.
Yeah,
And, you know, it's different because it is on a lake versus.
everywhere.
Everywhere.
And then it's, you know, your burden. If you ruin your system and you pollute your land, you know, your 3 acres or 2 acres or 5 acres you have, you're not typically going into a water body if you're inland of a water body. So if yours fails and because you didn't want to pump it, I mean, my mother, God bless her, I mean, they didn't pump theirs for 22 years until they sold their house. And I'm like, do you ever pump this? And they're like, nope. And it worked fine. It passed. They dug it up. The leach field was good. So
Alrighty then.
no rhyme or reason. But I've got an old system, so I pump mine all the time because I don't want to pay for a new system. So I stay on top of it. So, yeah.
All right, thank you. So,
You come over to my house and check.
I was gonna say, so next steps on this are to do the outreach.
It's a recommended next step, but it is a public hearing.
yeah, I do want to do a public comment. But you don't pull your lid off and just look in there every once in a while? Oh, I do. So at this time, I'm just making sure there's nothing out of the ordinary. So at this time, I'm going to open public comment for this specific hearing. Again, if you're online, use the raise hand feature. If you're in the room, please approach the lectern. Yes, please.
Jamie, could you pass over the microphone,
Yes.
please?
Thank you.
Hi, Don Bucher from Franklin Pierce Highway. The questions you guys have all started to ask, there's many, many more questions that I, as an impacted resident, would have. I guess I would like to start with looking at the minutes from the meetings that the group had. I couldn't find them. But I strongly, strongly encourage you to not vote on it today. Hold the public hearing session where we can ask all of these questions, get all of these questions answered. And I know my friends around the lake have the same types of questions. So I think you'll get more participation. I support some kind of ordinance. I didn't read it, as you said, this is really a pumping ordinance. I read it pumping and inspection, and the inspection part, I think there's some value to some of it. But my understanding is there's really 3 different types of inspections. It's not clear which one we're talking about. So those are some of the concerns that I have. I won't go into the list of all the questions I have tonight, especially if you're going to have some kind of public session for it.
And by all means, submit those questions with your review so that in advance of a public information session, we can get some of those questions answered and information in the details that go out.
So are there minutes from the advisory group that met that we can review? Otherwise, I'm going to ask a lot of questions. Because isn't it a public meeting like the invasive weeds meeting?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, I wasn't aware that there weren't minutes. Certainly the advisory group would be subject to the right to know law and there should be minutes. I'm sure that there are notes from the work sessions. So we'll have to make sure that we get those compiled and available.
Sure. Yeah, that would just save, I mean, I would review them if they were available. And I trust all the work that folks did, especially now hearing all the notes that I could find just had the town staff on it. And it sounds like there's been other people that have been included and stuff. So I think it's important, but lots of questions. Thanks.
Thank you. So I do think an information session is the next step, making sure that people know that they can attend that and answering questions and taking that feedback so that if there are adjustments that need to be made, I mean, in my experience, we have not been in the business of just imposing things like this without working hand in hand with the residents. So I do think that would be the next step. So some sort of posting and notification to the residents and then scheduling something far enough out that they can come up with questions, review what they want to, know when it is, I think would be the best thing. So tabling any voting until that's done.
Certainly, and I think in my mind, to piggyback on the way you described the select board's approach to this, I think in that messaging, it's important to communicate that the select board hasn't decided whether this ordinance is appropriate for the community right now or not. And we have this recommendation, we have this draft, and we're looking for input, and we want to hear the questions and feedback that folks have to help advise that decision-making process. Because I think sometimes that's different. I think sometimes folks look at the work the select board does and, hey, we're considering this, and folks just assume, well, they're considering it because they want to do it. And, you know, why would I need to tell them that I think it's a good or a bad idea? If people really think it's a good idea and they know that the select board isn't sold on it, they are more likely to come out. Or if they think it's a bad idea and know the select board isn't sold on it, they're more likely to come out. So I think that messaging becomes important if that's the perspective the select board wants to share ahead of this August or September session.
I do think messaging is important. Also, I know that this was shared with the Invasive Species Working Group, which I think has a lot of overlap when it comes to stakeholders. So getting their, I don't know if they've met since they received that, but getting their feedback as well. So what say you?
I agree with the chair.
And I guess I would ask, is there any more expertise we need at a meeting like this? Like, I'm trying to remember, did I know that there were 3 levels of inspection that this gentleman referred to? Oh, I don't know.
To clarify what I understand.
Yeah. I mean, I think we just talked about it.
So there's a very simple one. When you have your septic tank pump, the person who does it is going to say, oh, this doesn't look so good. You better have it inspected and do a full-blown inspection. You know, I think that's an informal, my guy tells me every time it looks good, probably don't have to worry about it. The next one is where the septic person comes out and does an inspection of, I don't know the details, the baffles. It's kind of what I would call a mid-level. And then the more extensive one, my understanding is, it could be wrong, I did a little bit of research, it has to do with the how it impacts the average high water table. And that is very extensive and involved and expensive. They have to dig down, find the bottom of the leach field, and do a lot of work. And the way I read the proposed article, it just says inspection.
Yeah, my intentions would be the latter, because it's not that I don't think it's that expensive for the numbers, but there's 2 things. One, the inspections of the baffles and looking at that stuff, it's insignificant to the pollution. It's how your thing's working, but if something's clogged and it's backing up, you'd see that, and that's why when they pump it and they look at it, oh, everything looks like it's working good. But the 2 important ones is are you 2 feet above the estimated seasonal high water table? That's the new state standard for a system in failure. If your system is below that mark, it is deemed in failure by the state. So that would be one inspection. And the other is just, you've ever bought a house, they just dig up the leach field a little bit and they look at the soil, and if the soil is black and contaminated at the top, it means it's not leaching, and they know your system's in failure. So it's, they dig a couple 2-foot deep holes and they look at the quality of the sand, and, a guy with experience in the proper training knows that it's in failure. So, a realtor, the state law existing on transfer of property within the protected shoreland requires a septic evaluator to do that for the seasonal high water. And any real estate transaction, if you care about, the home you're purchasing, you're doing a similar, where they're digging up a portion of your leach field to look at the sand. So it's, $500, $600, $800, so I don't, to me, for the quality of the lake as a whole, I don't think that's an exorbitant fee.
Well, it sounds like that needs to be clarified.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that needs to be specific and if there's a state standard for real estate transactions, and that's the level that the group is looking for in terms of what's inspected, then that should be clear.
And I think, to further expand, I think a correction could be made that if you make that bed bottom inspection and it's passes, then certainly you wouldn't need to keep recertifying that it's above the estimated seasonal high water. It is, but then maybe just the leach field sand testing would be, the appropriate at the 6 and 10 year marks or whatever.
So that's not clear, because on the 6-year mark, it just says inspection. So
Agreed.
do that once. But lots of clarification.
We have to define this better.
Yeah.
It could be that and an opportunity to include this in an updated draft, but it could be that if there's a real estate transaction in the last 6 years, that inspection covers a septic system older than 10 years for that 6-year period. And so we can make sure that that's contemplated in a future draft also.
Yeah, I think this just supports that plan we've been discussing seems to be the right one for us for now. So
If you haven't closed the public hearing, close that portion.
seeing no further comments, we will close public comment. So I don't know that there's anything.
Definitely don't
do.
need to take a vote. I understand a consensus of the select board is to schedule a August or early September information session with a tremendous amount of outreach efforts to try to get as many affected parties in the room. And I would certainly hope that the select board or a contingent of the select board would be able to participate in that, more probably as audience members to get a sense and have that feedback. So we'll work on scheduling and get working on sharing that information.
Okay, wonderful. So we're going to move on at this time to our consent agenda. Thank you so much for coming and sharing the information and for the effort. Okay, does any,
And for the public comment.
Well, and for the whole work. It's a big project.
I know.
Yeah, he does.
The hours of work.
Thanks, guys.
thank you.
Motion on the consent agenda.
Yes, so on the consent agenda, does anybody have any proposed modifications?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Schoschad.
Happy LOI.
Handshake, aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
Samaco, aye. We're moving on to appointments.
Terrific. So we've presented this set of appointment process with the summary of those appointments that are up for discussion and up for a vote since earlier this year. So I trust that you're familiar with it. This is an abbreviated version because we've made it through most of the appointments and reappointments. The only two that don't relate to the invasive species working group are just modifications of existing appointments. So that's pretty straightforward. Those aren't new folks. The bulk of this meeting's discussion step of the appointment procedure is the invasive species working group. And so you see in the printout that we have the members and the alternates for the invasive species working group. We'll talk about that more in the administrator report, an update on that group and how it's worked out. But we have 7 members and 7 alternates identified. I'll just fill in the blanks down. I've been working to connect with all of the stakeholders to understand who we have. And the only ones not listed on this spreadsheet are for Swains Lake and the Conservation Commission. Swains Lake is going to be Zach Downing and Wendy Tremblay as the members and the alternate. And then for the Conservation Commission, it's going to be Steve Hobbs and Jack Gale for the member for Steve Hobbs and alternate for Jack Gale. So anyways, we'll review those for a vote at the July 13th meeting. The group will continue. They're not making any decisions for the time being. And so certainly if there's any discussion to be had, now's a good time to do that on any of the appointments, including invasive species.
Okay, any discussion?
I'll make a motion to appoint the individuals indicated with the select board vote date June 8th, 2026, all of which were reviewed for discussion at the May 11th, 2026 meeting for the indicated terms on the 2026 terms expiring and reappointment sheets dated June 4th, 2026.
Okay,
Second.
all right, all in favor?
Sakosha.
Happy
It's too
LOI.
long, I can't second that. Handshake, aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
Samaco, aye. Okay, staff reports. Sorry.
Thank you. I'll start with June work anniversaries. Tim Booty in the fire department, 31 years. Scott Young, former Stratford police chief and continues to be a part-time officer in the town of Barrington, has been on the payroll in Barrington for 28 years. Katie Perry, the police and fire administrative assistant, was hired 21 years ago this month. John Huckins, who was formerly building inspector and we have retained as our deputy building inspector, code enforcement officer, and land use consultant, was hired 13 years ago. Eric Baker is a police sergeant that was hired 9 years ago. Jacob Cummings, the fire department, 9 years ago. Tiffany Cottle, our municipal office administrator, 7 years ago this month. Debbie Wood, Human Resources Administrator, was 5 years ago this month. And Eric Spinelli, who joined the highway crew 2 years ago this month as well.
Great.
Employee Training Spotlight has grown exponentially this month. And I have organized the Employee Training Spotlight by department. So you see the police department's been very active. Our canine officer with a couple of new certifications. Cameron Berry and Eric Baker have SWAT 1 and SWAT 2 certification now. John Sardina has TASER instructor certification. Our police chief, our Sergeant Libby and Deputy Chief Campbell participated in a patrol support for canine team certification process. In the Public Works Department, our transfer station administrator and highway support assistant has been active with many community engagement activities, including presentation of the Women's Club, roadside cleanup, which brought in 1.26 tons of trash from Barrington roadsides, Earth Day presentation at the elementary school, and creating a Books and Blooms submission. Adam Cook participated in a turning pushback into progress training and a flagger certification. Our Public Works Director participated in Pavement Maintenance 101, a bridge maintenance training program, and the New Hampshire Municipal Association's A Hard Road to Travel, which is a phenomenal training program. In the Building Department, our Building Inspector, Code Enforcement Officer, Zoning Administrator, Health Officer participated in the New Hampshire Health Officers Association Spring Conference. The Town Clerk's Office participated in the City and Town Clerks Association Regional Workshop, and the Division of Motor Vehicles, Secretary of State and Vital Statistics presented information from their departments. So this is when their state partners come and meet with all of the clerks and their staff on law changes and any upcoming policy. So we'll continue to report on trainings and certifications at future meetings.
That's fantastic.
Great. I've included in your printed packet and available online the tax bill insert, which went to all property owners in Barrington with a copy of their tax bill. In addition to town department updates on one side, we took the opportunity, as we have in the past, to share with residents information about the upcoming revaluation and assessing review. This has been a really effective way to get information out to folks, to be on the lookout for our assessing consultant to be out doing a broad brushstroke review of values in Barrington and what that might mean, highlight some of the numbers showing that our assessed values track at about 78% of the total market value. And so that is an important exercise which will be pursued this year. It's also an opportunity to correct a common misconception that a revaluation and changing values does not increase revenue at all. It doesn't raise any more money. It just makes sure that the taxes raised are appropriately distributed as required by state law. Also included some information on property taxes in Barrington. Some of these numbers just continue to blow my mind. We've talked for a while, and we even talked earlier at this meeting about how 17% of the taxes in Barrington fund the municipal government, 73% fund the school government, and 10% fund the county government. And for a lot of folks, they're only paying taxes in one jurisdiction. So it's hard to have a comparable measure of what that really means. And so the New Hampshire Municipal Association makes some data available that I started looking into and realizing that there's, other ways to frame this to really understand how different, unique Barrington is. So statewide, on average, all 234 towns and cities in the state, 30% of the taxes paid in those communities fund the municipal government. That's the average statewide. Barrington 17, the average statewide is 30%. We're almost half of the proportion funding municipal government in Barrington than the average. And Barrington is an average. We have 87th percentile for population. There's only 13% of towns and cities with more people than us. We're 80th percentile for land area. We're 83rd percentile for total valuation. We're not small by any measure. We don't have a super rich property tax base by any measure. But by measure of municipal property taxes, we are an extreme outlier. So 62% on average funds the schools and 7% funds the county. And that share being 17% of the total puts Barrington as a smaller than 93% of the towns and cities in New Hampshire. So we're in the company of the bottom 7% of towns. There's no city smaller than us. We're the bottom 7%. And many of those communities don't have a police department, don't have a fire department, don't provide much for services at all. And that's a result of their geography and needs of the community. Anyways, so we hope that residents read this information, digest this information, share this information, and help them make informed decisions when they're involved in decision-making in Barrington. So, updated 2026 calendar. At the last meeting, we shifted some meetings in October and November, so I printed you a new copy of that calendar. It's available on the town's website as well. As promised, I wanted to give you an update on the invasive species working group. I included in the printed packet and available online a draft of the May 27th invasive species working group minutes. This was the kickoff meeting. It was really a phenomenal meeting. I included details on all of the people who participated in that process and the knowledge and experience and background they bring to the table, not only as longtime residents of Barrington or property owners in Barrington, but people who have spent, in some cases, over a couple of decades helping to do water quality testing in partnership with UNH and other things. One ace in the hole that we had, the new state limnologist, invasive species coordinator, lives in Barrington on Mendham's Pond. So Georgia Bunnell participated in the meeting. She's going to present to the group in 2 meetings. And so that's a phenomenal asset that we have, and I appreciate her willingness to participate. Certainly she's not attending all invasive species working group meetings across the state, but she's participated in our kickoff meeting, and she'll be back. So that's terrific. And the group has decided that they will have 7 members and 7 alternates. 6 of those members will represent the 6 major water bodies in Barrington, and 1 will represent the Conservation Commission, and there will be alternates from each of those groups. They also decided that their preference is that the full members are voting residents of Barrington. So there's a number of folks who were seasonal and have residency elsewhere, and they felt like the committee, the working group, should be made up of voting residents. So they decided that amongst themselves. So we went over a legal review because it's a public body, which came up earlier. Probably should have given that spiel to the septic ordinance group as well. Talked about resources available. There won't be direct staff support at every meeting. They'll be self-governed, but we'll make space available. And there's partners at the state and the University of New Hampshire and the New Hampshire Lakes program. So the group also set a meeting schedule through the end of September to get those dates on the calendar. So those are available. Obviously, all the meetings are open to the public and available for anybody that's interested in participating. And we have provided them a copy of the septic ordinance just last week. They haven't met yet. They're meeting tomorrow, in 2 days, on Wednesday. And I expect that will be a topic of conversation at that meeting. And Georgia Bunnell, the state invasive species specialist, will be presenting to the group on June 24th. So if that's of particular interest to anybody, you're welcome to attend that meeting. And we expect that the group will elect their chair, vice chair, and secretary at the June 10th meeting. Any questions about that invasive species working group? Terrific. Moving on. Capital Improvement Program Committee has continued to meet, including facility tours, which were video recorded for anybody that couldn't participate. So special thank you to our Public Works Director, our Police Chief, Deputy Police Chief, and Interim Fire Chief for providing tours of the facilities and talking about equipment and the upcoming needs. So that group is really hitting the ground running, and they have elected Scott Shepard as their chair and Peter Royce as their vice chair. And they're meeting this Thursday. The Public Works Director will be participating in that meeting to kind of take a deep dive into the transportation infrastructure projects. And maybe not the project specifically, but the methodology for how do you decide when a road needs to be reconstructed and what goes into that, and the options for reconstructing a road and the expected lifespan and some of those topics. So pretty soon, and maybe even on Thursday, they will finalize their project request form, which will be distributed to staff and get that back out to folks. And finally, on my administrative report, I've continued to include training opportunities available to folks that are interested. That's all I have. Thank you.
Question.
Municipal Office Administrator Connell.
Go ahead, excuse me, could I ask
yes.
one more?
Of course.
One question. NHMA Director, has that progressed? a new director.
The New Hampshire Municipal Association Executive Director Margaret Burns has accepted the leadership role, which I think it's a CEO at CASA of New Hampshire, an organization she was involved with that will likely pay her a lot more than the New Hampshire Municipal Association did. So the New Hampshire Municipal Association is looking for an executive director. They've hired a consultant firm to manage that process. They have, I'm not sure this is public information, but I will tell you that operationally they have identified an interim executive director to manage the process, the day-to-day operations. And if that hasn't been announced, it will be. So I trust that they'll be able to continue providing a level of service that communities expect.
Thank you.
Of course. Sorry.
All good. I have a few wet signatures requested tonight: purchase and sale agreements, an oath of office, proclamation for Rec Month, and a warrant for the unlicensed dogs. There are currently 383 as of today, and then there's a couple things coming through on DocuSign.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I hope I'm not on that list.
Do you want to check?
Well, we had 2 dogs pass away last year, and I'm like, I don't know if yeah, I'll check it. Thank
Well, look
you.
for your friends and neighbors too while you're scanning through.
Oh, no,
Oh,
no,
boy.
they could
They can get the
deal with their own, yeah.
Okay.
Just double check.
Instagram.
Well, while she's checking on ghost dogs, we'll move on to old business.
So, Class 6 and private road policy update due to legislative changes is the next topic of discussion. Really a pretty basic one.
High on that list.
This policy that the select board spent a tremendous amount of time and effort on, you'll remember we had a group of builders and planning board members to help workshop this policy. That was a really effective process to arrive at the best compromise of focusing improvements on our Class 6 and private roads through the building permit process. So the legislature recently made changes to the requirements for the issuance of a building permit on a Class 6 road that go into effect on July 1st. And so essentially, a property owner on a Class 6 road shall issue a building permit. They have to sign a waiver, which is a requirement now, and they have to show proof of insurability. Nobody knows exactly what that looks like yet, but we have a process to check for that, and we've incorporated those law changes into this policy update. We also used it as an opportunity to propose to the select board a change to the policy for a nuance that's developed over the years. And I've called that out in my town administrator report, but there are circumstances where somebody has an existing structure. Maybe it's an existing seasonal structure. Maybe it's an existing year-round structure. And for a variety of reasons, instead of tearing that structure, or instead of renovating that structure, adding on to that structure, they tear the structure down and start fresh. And so the current policy, not this proposed adjustment, the current policy levies the 10% road improvement portion of the policy on the entire new structure. And so there have been some circumstances where, I don't want to say it seems unfair, but it seems outside the original intent. The original intent being expanded impact on the road is, those property owners should be contributing to the emergency response capabilities of that road and the condition of that road. And so what we have proposed in this policy is a mechanism to provide credit for whatever existing structure is there. So there's a calculation in the notes that you can see, but essentially if you have a 1,000 square foot year-round home and you tear it down and build a 2,000 square foot home, then you're only paying 50% of the building permit cost towards road improvement. And if it's a seasonal structure, instead of getting a 1-for-1 on the square foot, you get a 1 for a half. And so you're getting, we're still recognizing that going from seasonal to year round with a definition that's provided in the policy has additional impact on the road. And so, but there was already a structure there that folks were using. And so there's some credit to that. So that's a proposal that staff have kicked around for quite a while. This seemed like a good opportunity to propose that change. Tied in, we're updating the policy anyways. So Appreciate Jamie being here to help answer any questions on the legal changes required by the change of law or the recommended change to the credit for an existing home that has been raised. R-A-Z-E-D.
Questions from the board for Mr. Jennison?
Seems appropriate.
Yeah, it's pretty
Make a
straightforward.
motion to,
Can I just say one thing? I mean, I appreciate all the work, but can we make it shorter? This is a really long, wordy document.
And I think about it often, and there's more questions, and as it becomes shorter, I'm afraid there's going to be even more questions. So I would like to, but at the same time, I want to add things, more checklists and more like a time frame, and I can't seem to constrict it, without expanding. I don't know. It's one of those. It's the sun, it just does this. But I would like to add one thing, and I didn't get it in this, and I think it would save one step. Is currently we require the select board to sign the DocuSign for the municipal disclaimer. Now, and that's only in a category 3. And in the other 2 categories, you're still required to do the municipal disclaimer and acknowledge that you're on a private road and, the town's not responsible. So instead of adding that step and waiting till the board signs it and it goes back and forth, I would like to do it up front, and then everybody, even if they don't get approval and they never move forward, we've got the municipal disclaimer recorded at the beginning of the process, and then the board doesn't have to sign it. So I never really grasped the understanding why the board was signing that DocuSign piece originally, and we just kind of went along with it, and it is what it is. But if the board would consider that as well, that just all 3 categories, they do municipal disclaimer as part of the packet, and it's got to be recorded before. But there may be a reason that I miss why it was done that way, and so I just wanted to bring that up. No, the
Disclaimer.
yeah, the release and disclaimer that's required. B, under requirements, municipal disclaimer of maintenance responsibility and liability release and indemnification agreement. So 1 and 2, they just have to have it recorded and turn it into me. But category 3, once the select board approves the scope of work, then they get the signed copy from the select board that then they have to go get recorded. And so I don't know the need for the select board signature. And so I think it could reduce a step at the end of the process when people are eager to get their building permit. Monday night, you guys approve it. Tuesday morning, they go, and where's my permit? And I said, did you record your disclaimer? Well, did we get it yet? And, fortunately, the DocuSigns are pretty quick, and it's not too much.
The public hearing piece?
Wait, so you're
I'm wondering
saying
if the timing has to do with the public hearing piece.
that I can't believe that the registry records these with these signature lines blank.
No, no. He's saying that instead of waiting until the select board approves the permit, to just have it approved right at the beginning.
There's no requirement for approval.
But Jamie, so the first therefore on this indemnification and release is the town shall allow the owner a building permit on the property identified above. So I mean, like we would have to rewrite this disclaimer. Because if the select board signs this at the beginning.
No, I don't want the select board to sign it at all. Like a category 1, somebody comes in for a category 1, I make them go record a disclaimer. There's no select board signature. They just go record the disclaimer, and I take it and put it in their file because category 1.
This document?
It's the same document. It just doesn't have the select board signatures on the bottom. It's just there in a witness, and they get it recorded, and it's part of their deed. It's only category 3 that the select board signs it. The way we've been doing it.
I mean, I think we're going to have to workshop that. I appreciate the motivation for process improvement, but let's take that for a future revision. And certainly we can consider that. I mean, certainly the select board has adjusted the policy before in support of efficiency. But I want to make sure there are no unintended consequences, especially where this release, this municipal disclaimer and release is one of the only parts that's written into statute. So this is a requirement of statute that they sign this, not of this policy. So if we're going to make changes to that, I just want to make sure we take an opportunity to think through.
And I apologize, I didn't bring it up sooner, but
Yeah,
it was
no,
a last minute
understood.
thing that.
Yeah, that sounds like something that has to be workshop. We'll see you in July.
Yes, yeah, fair enough. Thank you for bringing it up, though.
And I can throw it out to the lawyer and see if it's a requirement that select board signs it, but I didn't see in the RSA or anywhere else that select board needed to be involved. It just needed to be recorded as part of that.
Well, the history, yeah, I mean, before the policy was this comprehensive, the select board used this municipal disclaimer as like the authorization to move forward. This was like the last day they signed it at that meeting, the night that they went. Tracy probably remembers those days. And so we may have evolved out of that need, but if that's the case, we probably need to change the language of the disclaimer so it's still consistent with law, but it's not. And we probably still want the select board signature on something because it's through the select board's authority, like probably just the meeting, the approval at a public meeting shouldn't be like the final thing. So we'll workshop that and bring it back.
Okay,
Okay,
do you
so-
want this approved the way it is right now for the next month or
That's
two?
the
or do
proposal,
you?
please.
Okay.
Right, 'cause
so
it has
did
to go
we-
into
who
effect July
proposed that?
1st.
Do we have a second?
I didn't even get to it yet.
Oh, go
Um,
ahead, sir.
Make a motion to update the Class 6 and private road policy as presented, reflecting changes required by 2025 SB 281 and making the adjustments to the road improvement requirements whereas an existing structure is raised.
Second.
All in
Koshai.
favor?
Happy Illinois.
Mancheck, aye.
Hardikoff, aye?
Demaco, aye.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you,
Stay
Jamie.
tuned.
Moving on.
Round 2.
Moving on to new business, the Public Works transition update. Mike?
Very excited for this conversation. Public Works Director Mike Netto is coming to the table. And Mike has inherited this progression, right? We started the conversation when we knew that Mark was retiring about this transition from a road agent model, highway department, to a public works model. And we knew that we wanted to do some work on this process, on this transition, before hiring a public works director so we could hand over the reins to somebody on firm footing. We brought in a consultant through UNHT2 to do an evaluation, make recommendations. We made some of those changes, and we purposely reserved some of those changes for the public works director to have a say in, right? And we advertised with the public works director job description an action plan, highlighting the steps that we have taken and highlighting the steps that we want the public works director to be involved in. And a big part of what we wanted the public works director to be involved with, that was a big part of the consultant's report, was the needs for some organizational and structural changes in how the public works department is set up and efficiencies to be gained by making some shifts there. And so we hired the perfect guy to come in and not only get continue the excellent work that our highway department has always done, but take the time and give the thought to what the next steps are, what this could look like. He hasn't skipped a beat in thinking about that as time has gone on. He has his bearings in the Public Works Department now, and so he has prepared for your review and discussion a organizational structure and staffing recommendations, which I'll let him report to you. Question off the
Before
bat?
you begin, do you have your old org chart?
No.
Okay, because it would be nice to be looking at them side by side. I'm
Yeah,
like,
we can prepare the kind of existing org chart.
Okay.
If you're looking at the org chart and you want to, make notes on it, right now there is no highway foreman. There are just 6 highway employees that report directly to the Public Works Director.
okay,
We've already have the facility and grounds manager that reports to the Public Works Director and the custodians that report to the facility and ground manager. There is no full-time employee in facilities and grounds, and the seasonal staff has reported essentially directly to the Public Works Director.
okay,
There is no transfer station foreman, but we do have a lead attendant, and there's kind of a blurry reporting structure with the attendants at the transfer station and the lead attendant. So there kind of is an existing reporting structure of sorts there. And the Public Works Administrator is the Highway Support Assistant position, transfer station.
What's that
administrator.
title?
Well, the current title is Highway Support Assistant and Transfer Station Administrator.
And how many people report to that?
Right now, that position supervises the transfer station. So essentially the lead attendant and the employees
So
and the
4.
attendants.
Connor, could you go back to the facilities and grounds? Did you say there's currently no full-time person?
Well, so we have a facilities and grounds manager already.
Who's full-time? That would have been
the-
Jim Anderson.
Correct.
Right.
There's a proposal, which Mike will discuss, to add a full-time facilities and grounds employee at some point in our future. And that position doesn't exist, so there's no incumbent there. But we do have the 2 custodians and the seasonal laborer. Apologize, you don't have a graphic, but we'll get one made, so
That's
you
okay.
can,
So is the F&G manager a working, that's
the working
titled
facility
the
manager.
working facilities manager right now? Okay.
And currently that role is empty.
Yes.
30 applications.
Really?
How lucky are we? Everybody wants to work for Mike.
Okay.
He's got the secret sauce.
I think I'm getting a better picture. So the from the old org till this, there's 2 new supervisors.
There would be 2, but would be pulled from the existing staff
Okay.
as part of the restructuring.
Yep. Yeah, and maybe it will also come into clarity as Mike kind of goes through what the recommendations are.
Yeah, why don't you
But
walk us
we
through
will
it?
make the org chart so you can see existing and propose as we
Okay.
continue the conversation.
So you have my narrative there. I'm going to try to hit on a few highlights. It's a little wordy. It's pretty long. I would hate to sit here and read the whole thing to you, but
So would we.
but if anybody wants to talk about how great I am, I'd love to hear some more. But this proposal really is to continue the transition from the highway department model to the public works model, which means that the public works responsibilities now extend beyond roads and snow into facilities, grant management, compliance, capital planning, customer service, and project management. Our goal is to improve accountability, resiliency, operational efficiency, and long-term sustainability. I'll go right into the highway foreman 4-person position. Primarily, it's a reclassification of an existing position. It's not organizational growth. This would provide a day-to-day field supervision and accountability. It'll strengthen winter operations and emergency response. It'll allow for leadership to focus on planning, budgeting, grant, and capital projects. And Connor and I worked on the impact to the budget. There's a few different implementation options that are there. But we're really looking at a total annual impact of approximately $14,821. The transfer station 4-person would move the operational management closer to the staff. Right now, I'm afraid that we stretch Erin a little thin between her administrative duties with the Public Works Department and with the transfer station. So in order to try to centralize that a little bit more, move that supervisory responsibility to a transfer station employee, which would formalize those responsibilities. It'll improve contractor coordination, scheduling, accountability, and work in some regulatory compliance there. Again, it would reduce the administrative burden on Erin, and the impact on that there was going to be roughly a total, and again, there's a few other options of $7,983 annually.
And Mike, it's
Yes.
likely that Aaron would transfer into this form and.
It would be likely that the lead attendant would transfer into that. My hope is to sort of keep Erin where she is right now. There is an
And where
administrative
is- which
portion
one
of
is
that.
she
that
right now, then, on this?
Public Works
She,
Administrator.
it would be the Public Works Administrator, yes.
And I
Got
think,
it. Okay. got
so,
it.
something
Lou would
important.
go directly to you, right?
Correct, yes.
Something important to keep in mind, and this is difficult, especially in a smaller organization. You know, when Mike and I first started talking about endeavoring in this organizational change recommendation, it's important to start by designing what's the best way to structure this department, ignoring the specific people involved in the beginning.
It's just helping me.
Of course. And so fortunately, we both believe we have a real opportunity here to leverage the talent and workforce and institutional knowledge that we have across various positions, where all of the structural changes, we have pretty clearly identified who could do that job with additional duties and responsibilities. And so that, you know, all of that would happen through conversations with those employees. And Mike's had those conversations ahead of this public conversation. And this is I don't say this is a wish list, but this is Mike's vision for, based on the current operational needs of the department, what he thinks the best way to structure and staff the department with duties and responsibilities and division of labor to do so. So yes, the transfer station 4-person would be the lead attendant role morphing into the transfer station 4-person position.
It would essentially shift a lot of those responsibilities that Aaron's having to do on to more of that lead or the 4-person role. Yes.
Would this Public Works Administrator still be involved with whatever the regional?
That is something that we've talked about a little bit.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't mind taking on that role myself, being the Public Works Director. I think it is somewhat appropriate to be able to do that. I know I've mentioned to Erin before, if she still wants to continue to do that, I'm really not going to hold her back from that. But being in my role, having those interactions with other communities, I think is important, and it should be right in my wheelhouse. So.
That probably needs to be worked out.
Yes.
Between individuals, actually, and how
Right.
that work sorts out.
These sort of finer details, I think we're going to have to hammer out as this sort of if this can even be implemented. So.
Yeah, and this, obviously the stage right now is all of these changes have financial impacts. And there are some that are a higher priority to Mike and I than others. But we wanted the select board to have exposure to the whole kind of vision and the cost to accomplish all of them, and lead into a discussion about what the select board's appetite was for considering some of these changes. Some could be implemented in mid-budget year and would be appropriate, and we could make those structural changes.
Because you would have enough play in your budget to absorb some of this?
Yes.
Yes.
Some the select board may want to see proposed in the 2027 operating budget. And that's why you see a 75% in April to December impact. So you start to see an idea, okay, if we were to budget for this. And so we'll get everything out on the table and then talk about some of the priorities. But certainly if you have questions on specific positions as he's going through them, interrupt.
Okay. Let me sort the numbers out here. The implementation options, you have $18,000 more or less.
For which position?
Well, where it says implementation options
Right, that's under each
on
position.
page 3.
Yeah, you wouldn't have those together.
Yeah, those are 18, well, yeah, but it's over the year.
Well, so yeah, I can demystify. So annual impact just gives you an idea because we work on an annual budget.
Right.
In order to make those changes, the changes in this case on the top of page 3 are for transitioning an existing crew member to a 4-person.
Right.
And so that would cost the town $11,857 in additional wages, $2,964 in additional benefits. and the total annual impact is 14,821. As an alternative, or for other implementation ideas, if the select board wanted to say, Mike, July 1st, we want you to promote somebody to public or to a foreman, foreperson, and that would cost for our current budget year, that would cost the 50%, $7,411. If you said, hey, Mike, we want you to put that into the 2027 budget, that is expected to increase the budget proposal by $11,116.
Okay.
Is that helpful?
Yeah,
Okay.
I was just, not, it was confusing to me. Might not have been to
Apologize.
everyone else.
I suspect that it was to everybody else, knowing your brain. So continuing with the transfer station foreperson.
So the impact to that annually was $7,983. The facilities and grounds changes, so it was kind of a nice opportunity struck on that with Jim leaving to be able to restructure that position, change a little bit of the wording in the job description there. And I had noticed that Jim does have an increased workload due to expanded responsibilities from the library, kind of falling under that purview there. He was also managing heavily his budget, try to shift some of that administrative tasks away from that position, more into the administrative role there. And so he became more boots on the ground. And also with that, we're hoping to create a full-time position in addition to that. And that impact, there's a few different options in there. We can use the seasonal budget and add a little bit to that to make it a full-time position. Or wait a minute, why did I put that in there twice now? Or
Things, yep.
it is two different things. Or to keep the seasonal position and then hire an entirely new, create a whole new non-seasonal but a full-time position within facilities and grounds.
So the first one is part-time people
Correct.
making full-time hours.
Yeah, yes.
And not getting
Yep.
benefits.
So right now we budget.
So just quickly, FTE change from where you are right now to FTEs if you were to implement this.
Well, there's different options. So in option one, that's going from a 28-hour, which would be a 0.58 FTE, to a 1 FTE, but as part-time hours, not with full-time benefits. That's option one. Expanding, right now we budget 28 hours a week, 52 weeks a year for seasonal hours. Truthfully, right now we hire a seasonal employee 40 hours a week in the summer to help with grounds maintenance. So, you know, that's how we utilize those budgeted hours. Option A is to increase the budget for seasonal, part-time seasonal hours to essentially 40 hours a week year round. Now that couldn't be the same person because we'd have to provide them full-time benefits, but we would essentially have multiple part-time employees up to 40 hours a week year round at that cost. So it's an expanded FTE, but not with the benefits associated. That's the option A for expanding the capacity of facilities and grounds. Is that helpful? Tracy, you still look like you're questioning that option or the details of that option.
So I think again, like understanding the proposed overall scope of this is, do you have 12 FTEs and your proposal is to move to 14 FTEs?
No. So there's options, and so it's not as easy as that.
Okay.
It's not as easy. So like this proposal adds 1.3 FTEs.
To the entire department.
This org chart, based on what we have now, to have this org chart with everything that's the
Being proposed
maximum of
would add
everything that's being proposed.
1.3 full-time equivalencies.
Correct.
Okay.
There's the big thing with full-time, with the big thing with expanding positions, creating or expanding positions, is not the associated wages, but it's the benefit costs of full-time staffing. And you'll see, because we'll talk about it in just a second, the costs skyrocket. And so as a way to expand the capacity of facilities and grounds without immediately getting into that big jump in benefit costs, option A just simply expands part-time seasonal hours so that Mike can hire a couple of people in the summer, or somebody in the summer, or somebody in the winter, wherever the situation may be based on the needs of the department. Option B takes and says, hey, we already budget at 28 hours a week for a seasonal employee. Let's transition that seasonal employee into our full-time facilities and grounds employee. That's proposed in the org chart. So that's a net of 37 FTEs, because we're already budgeting as part-time seasonal hours. But you see the cost increase. The wages is $9,300, not significant, but the benefit cost increase is approximately $50,000, with a total increase of $58,000 to transition that seasonal part-time position that we already budget for at 28 hours a week to 40 hours a week fully benefited. That would cost $58,000. The option C is to say, let's keep our seasonal employee and just add a new full-time employee, which is what the org chart shows, because we have our seasonal and we have an additional facilities and grounds employee to meet the need of the facilities and grounds department. So that total cost would be $98,000 in addition for a full year, and that's the cost of a person. That's the cost of wages and benefits to have an additional person. So again, the FTE question on if everything that's on this proposed org chart, if we had all of that tomorrow, that would be a net gain of about 1.3 FTEs. But there's options for the select board to consider in some cases with adding, adding FTEs, but at a marginal fraction of the cost. Didn't mean to take the reins there. Are there questions about those options or the needs in facilities and grounds division?
Is there a chance in reorganizing the department that we would lose an employee who is used to a supervisory role and no longer has that as part of their essential position functions?
Well, I would suppose anything is possible, but I certainly hope not. I know that this, especially the reorganization of the transfer station and the administrator, I don't want to make it sound like I'm taking anybody's thunder away. Everybody does an amazing job. It's just about managing workload. And hopefully that the current staff can understand that, I'm here to help lighten the load and spread it out across, existing employees in a fair manner so that everybody is not stretched incredibly thin.
So like I said, Mike's had an opportunity to talk to all existing staff about these ideas and help workshop some of the details. Certainly anything, if the select board was supportive of moving forward with any changes at some point in the future, the next phase of that process would be for Mike as Public Works Director and Supervisor to go into more detail about those changes with employees. And if an employee tells Mike, hey, I don't want to do a different job, then that would be a conversation that we'd have to have at that point. But there's no indication right now that any of the proposed changes would result in somebody leaving, if that's your question.
That was a question. The other question is, one of the things I feel has been a bone of contention as we brought that library to the town of Barrington was to not be increasing costs. And I'm hearing that potentially the F&G manager would increase costs, part of that being due to the fact that that library came to Barrington. Am I hearing
Time
that
out.
correctly?
Who do you think said that adding that library wouldn't increase costs? The library didn't say that. I didn't say that. Mark, as the road agent, didn't say that. We were very transparent about those increased costs. And we even helped the library trustees in their marketing materials estimate, based on how much we pay for a working facilities manager and our existing square footage and facilities, estimate a number of this is how much more it might cost to have these additional responsibilities. So if anybody went into their decision making with a library that adding an additional multi-million-dollar facility wouldn't add to our facilities and grounds costs, that was not for a lack of effort by me, the advisory budget committee, the library trustees, and others.
I thought they had a hard time coming up with what it would be to move into there and what the added cost would be. Because, you know, they didn't even take something like what they were in and go, hey, we're moving into something 4 times bigger.
Well, so that's a little something different. So those conversations related to
Well, I'm
their
just making
utility
sure-
costs, which the select board and others continued to ask for, and they had challenges because they didn't get utility bills from the prior,
Sure.
and they were changing the heating system. So they weren't able to estimate the utility costs, and nobody ever got an answer on that. The other thing was their custodial costs, which they ended up opting to contract out that service. And later in the process, they provided what the quote was to provide janitorial services for the building. But in terms of what the select board agreed to with the memorandum of understanding with the library trustees of the division of labor and having support for that facility, absolutely, it is that growth has contributed to the increased need. What we talked about during the process in 2024 is sometimes that stuff isn't immediate, right? So you have an increased workload. That doesn't immediately mean you're going to add 0.3 FTEs because you have 0.3 more, have a 30% increase in facilities or grounds to take care of. But that incremental growth, as it gets to a point, there's going to be a time where there's additional needs to maintain the facilities to the expectations of the town. No different than this facility. We have more responsibilities with this town hall facilities and grounds than we had with the leased space up on the hill. And so, yeah, that has, that need, from my perspective, that need was always talked about transparently as it relates to the library.
And I think it'll go down, because, obviously it was just fresh this last go round, but all the final, punch list items are done. It's kind of been passed. So hopefully it's not like an impactful thing that like, oh, we need to spend a bunch of time over there, to where, there were a couple of things. There was a backup on the septic. Some lights, we have some lights that are blowing transformers, but that's all been fixed. So I'm hoping that it's not like a big waste that, or that we're putting in time over there that we shouldn't have to.
Well, I don't want anybody to have misconceptions. I mean,
Right.
Any facility, especially an existing facility, has facilities and maintenance needs. We had the roof leaking this winter. Now that was fixed on a warranty, but who's the library staff to call when the roof's leaking over the winter because there's an ice dam? They're calling the working facility manager because that's who responds. We're not billing the contractor for the roof leaking. Now, yeah, they'll do that work. They'll take care of it. Give you a little teaser, the well at the library may need to be replaced. Maybe because it wasn't in use for a while, or maybe from just the fact that it's an old well that produced fine for Frisbee Memorial Hospital and during inspections, but isn't, meeting the needs of the facility now. There is and will always be facilities and maintenance needs at all of our facilities, regardless of how new they are. This building is a good example of that. As we've continued to settle into the building, there are parts of the floor that have buckled that we've had to come in and have fixed at a warranty, but somebody has to coordinate all that, and that position's the working facility manager. We're lucky to have one of that position. But just because the building is newly renovated doesn't mean that there aren't facilities and grounds demand on just general upkeep, coordinating the generator inspections and maintenance and all the rest.
I just wanted to jump in with something before we let you continue on with the, the item by item things. Just, and this is just my opinion, and I may not share it with the rest of the board, but I'm not opposed to these modifications. I think it's more of what can be managed within the existing budget. What are the immediate needs? What are the, mid-range needs, like next winter? What do we need to do to make sure that your people are available when we need them for the winter? And then what is more long-term? How much play do you have in your budget, in your existing budget, versus what really has to be a more long-term thing for next year's budget? I appreciate all of the details and sort of the position by position breakdown of the options, but I think what we really need from you, more so than going through each individual one and its impact, is a hierarchy of what the most immediate needs are.
Sure.
Can those be added into the existing budget or not? And then, what is going to be needed, say, before winter hits and we're dealing with snow removal? Is that different? A hierarchy of needs would be something that would be very helpful here for us to be able to tell you what we can and cannot do. I don't think that any of us are shying around the fact that we had a pretty significant amount of feedback from the residents of this town in the election and how they voted. So, we need to be diligent with that. But with that being said, I'm not opposed to making sure that this department is working for us and working for the future. Just the individual breakdowns and identifying what is going to make the most sense may not be something that we can tell you. It's something you can tell us.
Right. Yep. So I'll have to get back to you on that, just so I can understand the impact that can be absorbed right now. But this was really laying all the cards out on the table for everyone here to see, where I'm hoping to go with in the future.
This is very detailed.
Thank you.
And just to be clear, operationally, we can and will continue to operate with the staff that we have. The question about, before winter comes and things like that, Mike and his predecessors before him will use the tools available to them to provide the best level of service possible. Sometimes that changes because trucks break down or people are unavailable or things like that. And so I don't think that there is anything on this set of recommendations which needs to happen this year. We won't be able to, get through winter or anything like that. And so I don't want it to be teed up that way at all. It's more about getting feedback for the select board on how to get there. It's helpful having Mike identify his priorities, like, hey, this is good information. Identify your priorities. And if there's something you think that you can get into this year's budget, let us know that so that we can consider as we move forward. That's the type of feedback that we're looking for at this stage, so that we can come back. It's here for discussion because we don't want to move forward with anything tonight or maybe even not the next meeting, but just laying the cards on the table and getting some initial feedback on, yes, I see that need and the value in having that, or, hey, this working for person in the highway division, we've been talking about that for 8 years. We tried one, it kind of worked out, but maybe now is the opportunity to look at that again. So,
and I don't want to make it seem like perhaps you're not meeting the needs. I have not had any complaints. However, the human aspect is important. We don't want people in your department to be overtaxed and burnt out and looking to get out of their positions because they have value. So you had mentioned shifting responsibilities to balance things out so no one person is shouldering more burden than one person should be shouldering. So those are the kinds of things that we're looking for. But that hierarchy, I think, could be very, very helpful.
Certainly. All right, let me continue on with the Public Works Administrator and restructuring that. So that'd be transitioning the administrative support from transfer station focused work to really the complete Public Works Department wide support. That would improve with budgeting, certainly help out with grant procurement, reporting, Work orders is certainly a huge part of that now, and the customer service aspect of that is always huge with that role. It would also be increasing efficiency, reduce some duplication that we would have around there, and the impact with that would be $7,055.
And this was one of the strongest recommendations from the consultant when he came in. You know, he said, the way your operations are now, you need somebody full-time focused on administrative support of that department. You know, Mike mentioned, you know, spreading people thin and duties and responsibilities thin and things like that. From, you know, public relations and budgeting and accounts receivable, accounts payable, there's a lot that Mike, you know, in proposing this, is looking at consolidating, investing in one position to have the most efficient and effective operations.
Right. And it's, you know, no slight on one person or any individual, because everybody is really, truly doing an amazing job doing what they're doing day in and day out. But I can see it that it at times it can be very difficult to, you know, get a lot done with just a little bit of time that we have every day. So.
Okay. Any questions from the board, comments?
Look forward into seeing the follow-up material.
Okay. Me too.
Thank you for outlining that so
Yeah.
well.
Yes.
Okay, I mean, I think you do have our support in continuing to explore this and bring us more information. You know, we want you to succeed, and I appreciate you not running Joyce and I over with the dump truck. You walked right in front of him in the Memorial Day parade.
Oh. It probably wouldn't have looked good.
Yeah,
You can
that might
say
have been
that.
bad.
Yeah, you can say that.
Yes, we had the very
Former
special,
Public Works Director.
the very special location in the parade, right behind a tractor, and right in front of Mike in a dump truck. So, yes, Tracy.
So some things that would be helpful for me to digest in this would be, at the time that you're doing the org chart, if you can add into that the current level of where the position is rated within our compensation structure, where you're proposing it should go to within that compensation structure, within this list of this narrative and dialogue. You're showing us where you picture the position would go. I think it's important that to wrap my head around the need for your FTEs, what is going away? For instance, with the Public Works Administrator, certainly the person is going to be learning some grant administration, follow up to that grant, tracking, should we be lucky enough to achieve multiple grants, things like that. I think I kind of need to understand, okay, if they're doing that, what portions of their essential position functions are going away, and why would the position then be ranked differently if they're taking this on and maybe doing more of that support work, but no longer, you know, maybe dealing with supervising 4 FTEs? Why would there be a change in the range? I think I kind of need to wrap my head around where that projection might be coming from.
Sure.
And certainly part of that process would be job descriptions. So the select board already, as a matter of policy, sees and approves any any job descriptions where the essential position functions change more than 30%. So multiple of these job descriptions would go before the select board. We have a select board approved working 4-person job description. So, you know, we'd probably put that back in front of you anyways. But certainly if you're interested at this stage in seeing the job descriptions fleshed out, we can do that ahead of the next meeting so that you have that level of detail if you're ready for that now. We didn't want to be presumptuous, which is why I was kind of laid out in this way. But if you're ready for that level of granular detail, we can get that for sure.
I'm kind of shocked in looking at the numbers and thinking that potentially, what's your annual budget for your department right now?
Like $3 million.
Okay. Okay.
What was the shock part?
I was adding up the numbers of the most expansive options, and I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, actually, I haven't
Yeah.
even told that up. What is it?
So about 128,000, I think, if you jumped into all the different positions this year, and
Nobody's proposing doing that in 1 year.
okay.
This is
No,
this
no,
is
no,
like
no,
a
no.
this is like a multi-year. Like this is
Oh,
this is
good.
the vision.
I'm like,
This is the
okay.
vision for where
Yeah.
we'd like to be, and as policymakers, we're looking for input from you all
And the
on
special
how to get
projects
there.
and mechanics, we have that?
Yeah.
We
That's
have
Mark.
that, right?
That's Mark.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. And he's not reporting to anyone but you.
Correct.
Okay.
Sorry,
So
Joyce, you had a question?
so a time frame. If you could come back with a time
Yeah.
frame also.
We can propose a time frame if you have input on that time frame. I mean,
I can't wrap my brain around it yet.
Needs of the departments will show that, right?
we will rise to whatever occasion is necessary to provide the level of service expected by residents. I think the needs of the department, are there. The appetite for getting there financially and otherwise is the part where that's out of Mike and I's wheelhouse. That's not us, that's you all. And so we can provide a recommendation, a recommended implementation timeline. Obviously, in my role, I serve as a pretty regular gatekeeper on what I think the community and select board can and has an appetite for in spending requests and budget proposals and things like that. We have a pretty efficient operation because of that. But with something like this, where the select board has been intimately involved in this vision for transitioning to a public works model and the work we did in preparing that action plan together and things like that, we wanted to give you an opportunity early on to have your input a part of the process. But what I'm hearing is that we will have Mike prepare a prioritization of these changes. Some of them are bundled together, so we'll make that clear also. Also a proposal, a draft, an early draft of job descriptions, or at a minimum essential position functions for positions that are changing. Also a set of recommended implementation timeline based on current and projected needs. And I think those are things we can probably get back for the July meeting to continue the conversation at that point. And I guess part of that hierarchy is what, if anything, is there room in the budget to implement?
And what reductions might we experience? So, you've listed under full-time facilities and grounds, reduce the reliance on outside contractors. I always have a concern when I see that, because I'm assuming that you're only calling outside contractors when it's outside the scope of what people might be capable of, what's outside their wheelhouse and their training. How do we expect to reduce the reliance on that unless we're changing that essential position function to include somebody with a background in plumbing or electric or, something to that effect in the trades type of background. So, yeah, I think I personally, when I peruse accounts payable every week, I look to see how often are we responding to an emergency repair on a piece of equipment? How often so that kind of gives us a flavor for how often you might be putting a work order into the system for a piece of equipment and things like that. So, while I will never tell you that I have strong perspective on what the day-to-day looks like, that's kind of our tiny window into what might be happening with some of what I'm reading for details here.
Great.
Okay. If there's not any further questions, I think you have your marching orders.
Okay.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
We'll see you in July.
Appreciate the direction.
Okay, so moving on to the second item in new business, 2027 zoning explorations.
So the select board in recent years has been more interested and dare I say more involved in some ways in how our zoning aligns with our master plan and the select board strategic plan. The most specific example is when we sat down for strategic planning well, 2.5 years ago, the select board really concluded that a lot of the strategic priorities for the select board aligned with land use rules. And so it was at that meeting that we set a master plan implementation as a goal and an action item. We were very fortunate that year to receive a very large grant where we hired a consultant to help us with that work. And we were able to work through our conservation subdivision regulations and the town center zoning, which was just passed this last year. So the select board has, for a few years now, had an active role in making sure Barrington's land use rules are appropriate. The planning board leads the charge in drafting and workshopping and holding public hearings on zoning amendments. Although I will say the select board does have the authority to propose its own zoning amendments. I don't think we need that in Barrington. We got a planning board and a planner that does a phenomenal job, and that's well within their wheelhouse. But for the first time this year, in talking to a couple of select board members and some ideas or concerns that folks had, I wanted to have just kind of an open conversation of any topics that the select board as a whole would like to ask the planning board and planning staff to explore as potential topics for zoning amendments going into 2027. This is the time of year that the planning board is starting to think of their own potential zoning amendments or changes that they'd like to see in zoning. And so it dovetails nicely in the timeline of the annual review process. And so it could be something that's in the select board strategic plan or in our master plan or something that the select board has. So some of the topics the select board has discussed that may want to be in that category of, hey, let's give some consideration there. Senior housing, care, and development rules. We've had some recent changes, but that might be something that we want to take a deeper dive on or have the planning board or staff take a deeper dive on. Projects which may have a significant environmental impact. We're very appreciative of our natural resources in Barrington, land, water, et cetera. And so there's a lot of national and local, even super local discourse about the impact of like a data center or other industries which have an impact on our natural resources or an environmental impact. So that may be something we want to ask the planning board to spend some time on. Also hazardous industries. So how are we prepared for that? That's been a conversation the select board has brought up. Previously, there's some limitations on what we can do. But anyways, if there are ideas the select board have, staff can provide a summarized set of recommendations from the select board in a formal communication to the planning board. Hey, look, we as a select board would like you to look into this for considerations in 2027 zoning.
Go ahead. I know what you're going to say.
I'm really big on the AI data centers and figuring out, oh my goodness, how we do not impact our residents with the quality of the water and the increased cost of potential electricity that people are experiencing across this nation. So that's definitely important to me. I think this is my third year in a row where I'm going to ask again for us to do an air quality study so that we have a base in which to write some of the hazardous industry guidelines by saying, we don't want you to impact our air quality in Barrington. We don't want you to impact our water quality in Barrington. Yeah, so those are the things. I do think with the senior housing and the care development rules, before we ask planning to jump into that, we've agreed to talk with a consultant, I think out of Massachusetts, maybe?
Yeah.
And also to do a survey with some of our more experienced residents in town. Notice I didn't say older. Are more experienced residents in
I don't
town.
remember a lot of conversation about the survey part, but we did.
I think it's one of our 3 strategic plan items under that area.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about understanding the need. I mean, a survey is a way
So
to do that, but I don't remember specifically talking about we were going to do a survey.
One of our action items in there is to explore with our more experienced.
I think
Seasoned.
bringing together some people who, maybe elders in the community or people who work in that service. So the library has them offering, the rec department has them offering, Cornerstone BNA is here.
Mhm.
There's a grant-funded person at Riverwoods who provides free consultations around those
I-
kinds of services and see where the coordination is lacking or is good.
Yeah, and I think one of the other pieces to that is to explore where senior housing and certainly income related, I've talked to a lot of people as they have gone on to experience Social Security, where they're really in need for an apartment-based living situation that's based on their income. That is a study I feel like we may be able to use, like Stratford County Regional Planning, to explore, because Barrington has so many people who actually full out own their homes and have no mortgages. Is that a need or is that not a need for Barringtonites? I think also exploring how many open units there are for senior housing. I know that they've built a large number of them in Epping. I know that they're converting 2 other buildings near the old Gaffney home in Rochester. Took them quite a while to fill those rental units, and now they're building 20 more next door to that, is my understanding. So I think we need data. I think we need to look at the information and really talk with Barrington residents. If there was a 55 or a 62 and older community, would you want to sell your single family home and be in a rental situation?
So your focus is strictly on housing. I would like to expand that to community services and quality of life for.
I'm trying to
seniors.
figure out how planning gets involved in that, though, without doing
I'm
the
not sure.
groundwork
That may
first.
be more select board work. But I think it's a good time for me to put that forward.
And hats off to Cornerstone V&A for like their caregivers.
I think as far as the AI data center, I mean, we saw what happened locally recently. I think just asking the planning board to, with that in mind and natural resources protection in mind, just taking a look at what we've got and assessing whether we need to make any adjustments to get ahead of, what kind of feels inevitable at times, seeing, that we have land available in town and we want to make sure that our natural resources are preserved and protected for our residents, and see what they come back with.
So our last working group meeting was very much a brainstorming meeting. So just, as brainstorming meetings are sort of all over the place. The data center conversation was prior to Nottingham, so that will be a different conversation.
Oh, interesting.
But we were talking about the stormwater ordinances and septic ordinances, and so it's really a bigger picture of water quality and how do we maintain water as a resource. And so my suggestion is that we look at that as a broad research resource. And I don't know if we can get a master plan. That was one of the
Who was the
ideas.
gentleman, was it Keith, that brought in the Stratford County?
Keith Pratt.
They presented in front of us water quality.
The New Hampshire Department of
Studies.
Environmental Services.
When was that, Connor?
Hired a consultant, Keith Pratt.
Yep.
Hired a consulting engineer, Underwood Engineers was the one, to explore resiliency of water systems throughout the Seacoast region. And Keith advocated to the state to include Barrington in that service area because Barrington has an inordinate amount of community water systems, which is a water supply that serves more than like 12 people a day or something like that, or can serve more than 12 people a day. We have in our employ a public water subject matter expert, the preeminent regional public water expert in Mike Netto. But yeah, so we have all these community water systems and we have no backup. And so there's no backup plan for when they fail or when something goes wrong because we don't have any public water. Nobody wants public water, but if we can connect those together, they can be resilient among themselves and it doesn't involve the government. So anyways, so that was Keith Pratt, Underwood Engineering, and just an exploratory work that they got on a contract from DES.
So I'm thinking, do you recall when he came and he presented?
Yeah, that
And
was a while
it was a
ago,
while
right?
ago. I don't know if it was 2 years ago. It's probably 2 years ago at this point.
Yeah.
But that information was somewhat helpful, and it was certainly for me, paperwork that I hung on to and kept in my files because I figured we'd resurface the water issue again. But yeah, something.
So we have two ideas on the table. Air quality as a resource and water quality as a resource.
If we
Anything else
don't
that-
do an air quality study, from what I understand, we can't turn down an industry by saying you could potentially impact air quality in our town. And while there are not a tremendous number of industries that could have that negative impact, I think not having that air quality study done leaves us without the ability.
Yeah, I don't even know if
to
it's a
say.
study or if it's a greater understanding. I don't know
I
where
find,
to go with that.
and I mean, I'm just an electrician here, but I find that, really hard to, one, do an air study and then not do one every year, and or do multiple studies throughout the year and then monitor everything that's going on outside it to say, hey, this is the cause. I think, there might maybe be some magical technology out there, but I feel like that's going to be very, very challenging to do and prove. And being like, how does somebody come in and, their cogen system affects it, but it also affects it positively too. So we'd have to put in terms for that as well. So I feel like it's a hard grasp
Yeah, I mean,
to like point and prove,
I talked to an engineer at Wheelabrator, and basically, if an industry wants to move to Barrington, then the possibility would exist for them to put in place whatever requirements planning board chooses to implement to keep that air quality appropriately.
So that sounds like a
So-
And
different.
it's so difficult in this
approach.
town for big development for a company to come in anyways. I think that's a challenge in itself too. That's gonna keep those, I don't think we're gonna see a coal mine. I don't think we're gonna see a paper mill. We were navigating the trash, or the
Sifting of the,
the
Yeah.
waste,
Mhm.
that was a consideration, but everything was green about that project as well.
right,
So, I think I don't want to waste money. And you know what I mean? And I feel like a study, like, yes, we can all smell the different air between where we can assume where it's coming from, on different days.
Mhm.
And, and I love our attitude about being, forward ahead of it and trying to preserve what we have so it doesn't get any worse. But I don't think it can be that black and white to being like, oh, well, hey, data centers are known for this. We can't have you in here for that. I would be curious to see.
well, I'll tell you, there are already air quality studies that I've read, and I think it's by county, if I recall. I don't think it was by municipality, and we were a nice, clean, beautiful air quality result in this
I
area.
think it's a different discussion to say, what are other communities doing about air quality? Is anyone in the state looking at any kind of ordinances? That would perhaps be an interesting thing that is not a costly.
Dana,
Yeah.
I see you
I
putting
would
your hand up.
suggest that the further congestion is that much of the air quality here is not locally produced, but comes from afar. And the fact that we build something here may or may not have, unless we're building a coal-fired plant in this town, I don't think what happens in Barrington necessarily is going to affect the air quality here, because the air quality probably with the new coal-fired plants in Ohio coming online for the current administration is what's going to make our air quality change anyway. That's what caused our air quality problems in the past, was what was happening in Ohio and Indiana. So I'm not sure that it's would be particularly useful, other than as an advertisement saying that our air quality is good or not.
Well, I think we can see what the planning board, we can pass them a list of our discussion points and see what they what they think and if any of them have knowledge about what other towns and municipalities might be doing regarding that. Joyce, since you've been involved in the just workshop discussions, has there been anything about invasive species since we've made a commitment to sort of continue working towards long-term planning there? There were some articles last year that were amended. Has there been any further discussion? We have the working group
We're
now.
not quite that far
Okay.
along yet. And that could be part of a big look at water as a resource.
Okay.
How else would we study hazardous industries if we're not looking at our natural resources? It's just here on the list. I'm just curious how else we would explore it.
Well, yeah, I put it on the list just from what I've heard from individual members. I think the point of this is to say what is the cream that rises to the top that the entire select board or majority thereof says, let's pass this on to the planning board.
AI.
So I'll tell you what notes I have right now, and you can all tell me if there's something missing or if you all object to this coming, as a whole from the select board. So in the area of natural resources protection, the area that the select board is interested in the planning board exploring in terms of regulatory options, to explore either what other communities are doing or if there are other active steps, like we have to spend money or do something first, but not do that, but do the research and come back. One relating to water quality, as it might relate to like a data center or something like that, which may also facilitate a conversation about a water chapter of the master plan, water quality chapter of the master plan. Also air quality under this natural resource protection area. Air quality, what regulatory scheme exists for preserving, protecting Barrington's air quality. Maybe it requires a quarterly air quality test that we say we don't want to pay for because it's too costly. Or, maybe it's something with publicly available data that we just have a regulation for. Also, maybe as a precursor step to going to the planning board as it relates to any regulation, land use regulation for senior care / services, is maybe having some sort of a senior stakeholder roundtable discussion about what are the hurdles, talking to maybe some of the providers. We've sent a letter to a provider in Massachusetts. They have more demand than they have capacity to meet, so they're not looking to grow in this area right now, but they did provide some interesting insight on what hurdles they experience. And so we could have that roundtable. Any land use related topics that come out of that, we could pass along to the planning board. So those are the areas that I've heard. Any objections to pushing those forward or anything that's missing?
The one thing missing, I think, that we talked about a couple of years ago was childcare.
Oh.
And if that comes into the I think zoning ordinances may pertain to that.
And I'll have to update myself on the regulatory changes, because there were a couple of pretty aggressive statewide zoning changes that were proposed in this legislative cycle, which I didn't follow close enough to know if they died on the vine or not. Okay. But one of them eliminated any zoning restrictions on childcare facilities, which is probably a little bit too extreme, because there's places you might not want to have a childcare facility. But anyway, so some of those points could be moot to the topic of statewide zoning.
True.
Yeah, I didn't see that on the
I think
list
one of the-
what was going to the governor.
Oh,
One
okay.
of the important pieces could be with that, if in fact we can't regulate what area they're built in, planning board can certainly indicate what portions of the building code and NFPA would apply in those situations. I mean, we can't have 25 children in a building with 5 preschool
But aren't there
teachers and
state
not.
So I will say this:
That's what I'm saying, like,
we can
we
adopt
we can
building
regulate
code.
more than they can, though. would
We I don't believe at all that we want to. The state does a fine job of building code and fire code.
Yeah.
Please, if you would.
We no longer have the ability to adopt building codes individually through municipalities. They've phased that out over the last 2 code cycles because they didn't want builders going from one municipality to the other, not knowing what to expect. There's a few towns that has some nice made-up stuff. But what we do have the authority to do in other areas is to adopt health ordinances through the select board without those kind of changes. But what you see on a state level is a reduction in oversight and protections because of the need. And so that would be the thing. If you want daycares to come to Barrington for childcare, you really have to lower the standard, not raise it. You have to make it a really low standard because nobody's doing it.
Centers.
Yeah, huh?
No Leering centers.
You know, so it would be a data center with childcare, because there's no restriction to have a childcare center here now, just nobody's doing it. It's just, you know, it's the staffing. You know, the problems that persist, I don't think can be solved at the planning board level, unfortunately.
That's a good point.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.
So,
good with that.
doesn't mean it isn't a topic that we can't say that this is, you know, be on the lookout for that. Obviously, the market analysis that we did said that there's a demand for childcare. And in conversations with developers that are building out required mixed-use development that has commercial space, communicating to them that we hear a continued need for childcare space. Okay, so with the addition of childcare, natural resource protection, including air and water, senior care and services, and childcare. Is there consensus among the board that we want to send those topics along for 2027 zoning considerations?
I'm not quite sure what zoning we're talking about for senior care. Like, what are we? I mean, I'm just anticipating if that's at the planning board level. I feel like I need a little more direction.
I have no answer to that because I don't think we've actually surveyed what our community needs are. Like, we don't know. I remember when Bellamy Woods sat before ZBA and the owner of that private facility told us that he had empty beds because he did not have enough staff to open up whatever percentage was that were closed rooms. And so I just really feel like before we're addressing planning and zoning, we need to figure out our data sets before making recommendations for, I can share with you that if you put an assisted living facility in town, you will have an increase to your EMS and paramedic budget. Lift assists will become a thing multiple times a day. I just think we need data before we say to the planning board, hey, come up with some stuff, because I just don't feel that we've explored appropriately.
So I
So
think,
what has prompted this as far as like the driving factor for the elderly? Has it just been?
We want
have we
Barringtonites
got-
to be able to stay in town.
Well,
as they-
no, I know, but what
Oh.
has prompted that? Have you had like 20 people come to you saying like, hey, you know, I think this is a real issue in town. You know, can you do something about it? Or like,
Yeah, the biggest existing data, when we did the housing master plan, housing chapter of the master plan, there was a very comprehensive survey. I want to say there was like 600 responses. I know you were on the steering committee,
Yeah.
but there were a lot of responses. And one of the core identified needs from the community responses, from those surveys, were opportunities for people to age in Barrington. Now, that means a lot of different things. For some people, that means moving from their 3-acre home where they got to plow their driveway and mow their lawn into a condo where the association does all that. For some people, that means moving into first floor living. For some people, that means having an apartment. For some people, that means having a care facility of some sort. So that doesn't get as granular, I think, as what we're probably ready to talk about it, but that's probably the biggest guidance. And as a result of that, the select board has.
so 600 surveys went out, and then we have what 10,000.
Well, yeah, it's a fraction of the people that respond.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. So, I mean, just hearing that data right there alone, you know what I mean? It's like, okay, is this really like a super need, or is it just a small group that had concerns?
Chairperson, can I speak?
Yes.
So one of the other pieces with that is the housing for young families is often being held up because we don't have the turnover
Right.
that we would expect to have. You know, when I'm 75, if I don't have another place to go, am I going to stay in my 4-bedroom, 3-bath home, when really that home should be filled with a family unit. And so I think part of it is being forward-looking with that portion of the master plan so that we're allowing those families that, you know, younger people provide the care that we need as we age in place and what have you. So I think that's part of it too, is the flipping of the housing inventory. You
And people
can't,
are
if you
living
got no
longer.
place, yeah, and they're living longer, and if you have no place to go, then you're staying in your home, so.
But these are good conversations, please, Joyce.
So my interest is around senior is not really proposing any zoning changes particularly. I think people have the right to build some senior housing if they choose to do that. It doesn't belong in the planning board world. It's just, how do we best coordinate services for people who are living longer? And I see it mostly because I'm in that demographic and I see what people are struggling with.
Yeah.
But that's really, I think, a different conversation.
I kind
Then
of see
zoning.
that, yeah.
So we'll take that off the zoning list.
Keep it on our work.
Natural resources, air, water quality, and maybe some childcare.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, again, is that an issue to talk about, but not a zoning issue?
The
Right.
childcare?
Yeah, the child.
I haven't
Well,
heard that it's a
yes.
zoning issue. And you know, well, I shouldn't say that. Donna Masucci is childcare royalty in the state of New Hampshire. A Barrington resident, longtime planning board member, not currently, but and business owner. And the groups that she's been a part of in Concord I don't want to say this. They've been focused on how to expand childcare options for across the state. And their recommendations very frequently are statewide zoning solutions because it's not a one size fits all and zoning's different in communities. Donna doesn't feel that Barrington's existing zoning is prohibitive for childcare. And she's even used our zoning provisions and some of the applications that have come forward for in-home childcare and others to take to those state conversations and say, hey, you could use this as an example. So I think the greater childcare community believes that statewide zoning is the solution to the land use impediments to childcare development. But I haven't heard anybody say that Barrington zoning specifically is preventing new or sustainable childcare options.
So, I mean, I just see these as talking points. The subject matter experts here are the planning board. They're more plugged into this than we are. We track legislation, we discuss things, but they may or may not know. It's entirely possible that we pass them a topic and they say, we don't have any feedback on this right now. I'm not aware of, anything specific related to childcare, but I'm not opposed to leaving it on there with the understanding that there may not be anything to be done right now.
I think for me, this conversation
Same
has
with the
more
air.
gone into strategic planning for select board and not so much what to pass on to planning board.
So what, if anything, does the select board want to ask the planning board to consider in the realm of
Planning or
zoning
zoning?
amendments? Well, planning board for zoning amendments.
Maybe just to keep in mind, that it is an identified part of the strategic plan to, this really goes to both the aging in place and the access to childcare centers, just to keep in mind that going forward, we would like to continue to, leave things open to that. And we're not looking for things that are going to make that harder. That the inverse of supporting something can be what is necessary. Yes.
I would like to see along the 125 corridor that we continue to ensure that there is greenery, that we are not going to end up looking like Epping where we clear cut the entire 125 corridor and stick a whole bunch of commercial buildings in without having any trees anywhere to be found on the properties. And I personally think some of the feedback that we got when we had Gove that came and spoke and they showed us the models of different, I think the exterior of buildings and what they looked like became very important in those discussions as we brought the whole town together. And so I think having planning board explore, what would we like the outside of maybe a large development to look like?
So
if it's
architectural
being-
zoning.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, I mean, yes, so that's helpful to communicate to them. The only kind of legal mechanism to do that is with the form-based code, which was just recently adopted for that town center area. Certainly, if it works, the planning board's already said we want to expand that.
Okay.
But probably that's in the category of like asked and answered, like they're on it.
Okay.
They're on that part of it.
Good.
Relative to the greenery, and I think it's important to reiterate and say, from the rooftops, whenever anybody is listening, there is nothing that can stop somebody from cutting all of the trees down on their property.
Correct, but when they build something on that property, there is zoning that can be in place because I had to
That zoning is
spend.
in place.
Okay.
So we have landscape requirements for the first, the frontage on Route 125.
Okay,
But those landscape requirements are not 100-foot trees that have been there forever.
understood.
And those landscape requirements are also, on occasion, waived by the planning board for businesses that have, or I shouldn't say need, but have a need for visibility for successful businesses. So it's not. I think it's a well-intentioned provision of zoning, but it's not, I don't believe the planning board feels, based on decisions, that it's a one-size-fits-all solution to what people really want is for all the trees to stay lining 125
Understood.
and to be green the whole time you drive through.
I just
That
would like to
isn't
know that we're
possible.
being responsive to their wanting and respecting rural character, whether it's, starting over with the new 2-inch to 4-inch trees versus the 2-foot wide trees.
Yeah, but I
So-
mean, those landscape plans, that's why you see with like TurboCam's development, they have that really nice row of plantings along 125. It doesn't mean you can't see the building, and probably everybody would still prefer to see the natural woods there. Or like out here, you have the spruces that were planted and that part of it. But then you have businesses like Venture Power Sports, who has expanded, and their business structure really benefits from visibility and being able to, have stuff out there. I think Venture got a waiver for the landscape plan when they expanded, right? Yeah. There just so happens to be another business in that area that's before the planning board right now, which we will not talk about. But these conversations come up relative to the landscape plan requirements.
Awesome. Okay.
I think the language around water quality might be to sort of support the planning board's emerging interest in that.
Okay.
And that.
Is the board's happy with that
I-
approach?
I'm not sure what you're
Well,
saying, so let
because
me
they're talking
understand.
about also looking at septic ordinances, invasive species. They're concerned about that and how zoning can fit with that. So, I think that conversation has started at planning board.
And you're talking about the reliance on the water systems and creating redundancy to be certain that those.
Well, data centers would, could be that. I don't think we've defined it. The planning board has defined it.
I think we're good with
I
that.
have clear as mud direction. What I will do is I will draft up what I think the select board has identified, and I'll send it to the chair
Okay.
for review. And if she agrees, then we'll send it along. And if she thinks the rest of the board needs to see it, I will send it to you as a draft document, which you can review and communicate to me about. And if we need further discussion, we can. Is that fair approach?
Sounds good to me.
Works for me.
Fantastic.
Happy to filter the mud. Okay, moving on to select board report outs and concerns. We'll start with Mr. Sakosha.
Dun-dun-dun, Parks and Rec. There was ribbon cutting last week, Tuesday, which was exciting to see. Great addition. It's been full of like yoga classes. I've seen a lot online, so happy to see it being used. And summer camps starting at the end of the month. And the HRCU summer concert series, dates and artists are up on their Facebook. So go ahead and check that out.
Fun. planning board, I think I pretty much talked about what we did at the last meeting, the brainstorming. Today was a school collaborative committee meeting. And I'll say something if you want to add to it. That's great. One of the things the elementary school is dealing with, they have a failed septic system, so they will be addressing that need. We spent some time talking about our attending school board meetings and school board representatives attending this meeting. And we've decided monthly seems to be onerous and not that necessary. So we will no longer put it on the agenda, but when we know something is important for them to come, they'll contact us or we'll contact them depending on.
Allowing an
hears it
opportunity
first,
to change
and
the
then
agenda.
we
Yeah.
will adjust the agenda at the beginning of the meeting to allow them to speak as an invited guest, but we won't put them on each time.
Say to Mink.
And in 2 years, the primary moves to June, and that will be still during the school year. So talking about how to adjust that. School is pretty certain that they think it's a safety issue to have children at school while all the community is in the building with open carry, especially.
Okay, thank you.
ABC is going to have a organizational meeting Wednesday, the 10th, 3:30. Library, interesting information, I think. There are over 5,000 library cards now, over half the population of the town, although some of those are from out of town. The library will be closed the 3rd and 4th of July. And the summer reading program starts on the 22nd, goes through August. This is just kind of an interesting thing. Some guy, some person, who I don't know, it's not from this town, came in and gave the library a $500 check. And when they're they ask him about this, he's going around the state and just picking out random libraries and giving them a $500 check.
How
Oh,
cool.
good
That's
job.
awesome.
Yeah, how cool is that?
Life
Anyway,
goals.
okay, and the next meeting is 30th of June. Transfer station, Mike has made some contact with Madbury. My sense is, I don't know if you've heard back, but probably they're going to discuss things at their meeting.
Yeah, next week, we're gonna do a walkthrough with their select boards.
Right. Yeah.
They had
So-
sent a request, just for brief context, they had sent a request. They're not in compliance with disposal requirements in the state of New Hampshire because they have a trash pickup service, but they don't have a transfer station. And so they're kind of required to have a place that residents can come bring trash. And so they asked the town, it kind of came through the fire collaboration work we were doing with them, but they asked, hey, is there any way that it would make sense for us to like contract with you for use of the transfer station? And our answer was basically, well, what's in it for us? Like, why would this be good for Barrington? And so the Transfer Station Recycling Center Review Committee has just been basically kicking those tires. Like, hey, look, our utilization of the facility is actually down a little bit. Our tonnage is down, and we're in firm footing there. And so if there was a way to offset some of the costs, they're exploring that. Is the kind of nuts and the bolts.
Excellent.
Anyway, okay, this was kind of a collective thing when they discussed or looked at alternatives of getting our own truck and all that sort of thing. I think the recommendation of the committee is not to do that probably isn't the best idea. I think Waste Management's proposal is coming up shortly. Do you have a date on that, Mike? I don't.
We have been in contact with from
Lapierre, yeah.
draft to their legal.
Yeah.
So we should be seeing that.
Shortly, yeah.
And that's likely a warrant article in 2027 for entering another long-term contract with Waste Management. And the terms of that are what we will work on over this year, the rest of this year.
So that there will be another meeting, 24th of July. The roadside cleanup, I think you noted earlier, they collected 1.26 tons of trash. But to put it into perspective, last year, for the same problem or same day, they picked up less than a ton. So this is closer to the average. Side cleanup was picked up. My report.
Awesome, thank you. Tracy?
Yes. So for CIP, I was gallivanting around the nation while the CIP group did their tours of the different facilities and made the videos that will be available to residents as well, and hopefully answer many questions about our current facilities and our future needs. The ZBA met for 2 hours and 36 minutes, and I attended remotely from Charlotte, North Carolina. The end result of that was that on Holiday Shores Drive, there was a case that the lawyer representing the owners decided to allow for a continuance past a 90-day decision, apply for easement on, and make appropriate changes as recommended by ZBA members. I as well sat through the Select Board School Board meeting, and I think that Joyce did a very good job explaining where that meeting went. The one other discussion was surrounding the lighting that would go on Route 9 external to Barrington Middle School in order to publicize the school safety zones and make sure we're keeping kids that may be crossing that roadway safe. So I think that was about it.
Okay, thank you. You all have received copies of the invasive species working group minutes, so I'm not going to go over those. Stepping into new liaison positions, I have been in touch with the Conservation Commission to open the lines of communication, but I have barely been home in the last month, so I haven't actually met with them yet. But I look forward to sharing more once that has occurred. So with that, if there's not any other concerns of the board, we will move on to our second public comment. So I'm going to open public comment at this time. If you're online, use the raise hand function. If you're in the room, please feel free to approach the lectern. Okay, Mr. Jennison.
James Jennison, 18 Kate Road.
Is it on? Yeah.
Something about when Mr. Harrington was here and segueing off the air quality. I didn't know if anybody has asked any New Hampshire representative or federal beyond that about cloud seeding and the things they spread in our environment, because I think it's quite real, and I think that has a greater impact on some of the air quality that we experience. And then I love to give my opinion on the education front. I thrive on information as a debater. You got to know the facts. But I think, like Mr. Harrington said, we perpetuated the same problem, throwing more money at it. We don't change the way we teach necessarily. And I have some very direct experiences with IEPs. I mean, honor roll students that have IEPs and get special pull-out services. So there is some nuance to the discussion about, special education and how it's driven the cost of education up. And I'm not saying it's not worth it or is worth it, but I think it's a broader discussion than, we just identify stuff differently and more. And I think it's an interesting conversation that I'd love to spend hours debating.
At a school board meeting.
Yeah.
Actually.
All right.
They meet once a couple of times a month.
Okay. And seeing nobody else making themselves known, I will close public comment. I'm not aware of any need for a non-public session this evening. So at this
Correct.
time, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Of course,
Skip the line.
Patrick, aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
Smock, aye. Adjourned as of 9:28 p.m.